basic introduction to Agile, where I gave you a little bit about the different types of Agile methodologies like Scrum, Kanban, Extreme Programming, Lean. So at a very high level. Now we are going into a detailed level. What do I mean by that? This is the chapter where I would talk about plan and implement the Agile. And most importantly, all the videos in this chapter, I think I have 5 videos in this, but these are very, very important. Now, out of all the 3 chapters, if I have to pick one chapter which is the most important, it is this one. So make sure you understand and you watch all of these videos in a detailed manner. Make notes out of it to make sure that helps you at the end stages. Don't forget, if you don't have notes right now, pause this video. I want you to go back, get a pen and paper or laptop, start typing whatever important things I would be telling you. Okay, let's see what do we have in this. First, I'll give you the introduction to Agile, which is the Agile planning introduction, not the overall Agile, my bad. That's something which I covered in the last one. But from the Agile planning introduction and detail, I will move to the product vision statement. We'll start at a high level, which is I'll probably talk about the levels of planning. We start from portfolio, then we will go at the product vision level. From there we'll talk about the roadmap. From roadmap we will talk about the release planning. From the release planning, I'll go into further detail, the most granular level, which is most likely your iteration planning. And in that even, you forgot about the daily stand-up. I'll talk about the daily planning also we do. So this is your first section of the Agile planning, and the second section is actually about the Agile tools. Very important keywords I would be discussing in that. So project planning to ensure the project is going in the right direction and team is picking up and delivering the most valuable items as per their capacity. Now if you remember, let's say I need 100 things. As a customer, I have 100 different user stories. Now, I will tell you if I'm a product owner, I will tell you that out of these 100, these 5-10 are my most important, these are my second, and these are my third most important. Probably I'll make into buckets. Now, I expect from you that the team will pick up the most important topic, start explaining it, and then move to the next. But I'm pretty sure you will ask this question to me. Why are you, Varun, doing this? The main reason why Varun is doing this is to make sure that my service is moving in the right direction, while my team should not get burnout. Like this class, right? These set of videos. This is my product. This is my baby, and I want to make sure that this product is the best PMP product all over the world. That's my vision. And how I'm doing that is through these videos, through my question explanation videos, through the types of real type questions you get in the real exam. Try to simulate on those levels. That's my Agile planning. Now, we'll start from iteration 1 to iteration 2 to iteration N. What do I mean by iteration N? It depends upon your product. Whether your product or service or your project, that do you need 5 iterations of 2 weeks each, or do you need 10 iterations of 3 weeks each, right? It could vary from your product to product, from your project to project. And of course you will have team velocity into picture. I'll explain velocity in a detail, so don't worry, this is a new term which you are confused with. Please don't worry, it's on me. Now ultimately, I want to make sure that all of these comply with my product vision and most importantly, my roadmap. If you want to go into more granular level, it is actually my product backlog. That is, I want to make sure that all the alignment is as per my releases. Now, I know, one time my student asked me that, Varun, can you tell me some of the most important concepts of the Agile planning, not the concept, but the characteristics. And I actually showed them this slide, that most importantly, it is just in time and just good enough. What do I mean by just in time and just good enough? Just in time was actually a popular concept which was adapted from the manufacturing industry, where they wanted to make sure that they bring down the inventory down to zero. What do I mean by inventory down to 0 is, let's say I gave you a project to make 100 iPhones for me. Now, I will only give you 100 screens to make those 100 iPhones. Why did I do so? There is a logic behind that. What is that logic? That logic is that if I don't give you something extra, then you as my team member want to make sure that you do your job perfectly and you don't waste anything. So this reduces the waste. So just in time is, we will do it up to a level which will bring down all the inventory to 0 to make sure that your quality is improved. Agile adapted that principle of just in time, which is, we'll do the planning whenever the right time is, and only sufficient which is required for near time, not from the long perspective. Then it has to be a collaborative approach. All the team members, product owners, Scrum Master have to collaborate together in this planning session. From there, we will move to the continuous improvement. Very, very important quality technique. In Lean also we'll talk about this. From there, we'll talk about incremental and iterative. Now, a lot of people used to ask me that, Varun, what is the difference between incremental life cycle and iterative life cycle? But now, I hope that, in my last video where I explained you the types of life cycle, this thing was covered. And so many people, I can't even tell you the number, sent me an email that now we have understood the difference between incremental and iterative life cycle. So if you are still confused, I would recommend you to do one thing. After you watch this video, just go back and do a revision of that one, because that's a very important video. Okay, last two characteristics, we have the progressive elaboration, rolling wave planning. Now, progressive elaboration, rolling wave planning, another most confusing topic. Even I was confused. So if you imagine I am confused and you tell me that, Varun, you are our mentor, then this topic has to be confused. And this thing was resolved by mentor Nidhi. Oh my God, I just love her. The way she explained the progressive elaboration, rolling wave planning, I was like, wow. This is how I want to teach my students as well. So Nidhi is our ACP mentor, Agile Certified Practitioner course, which a lot of people ask me that, which course should we do after PMP? And that's my favorite one, which I tell them. So she takes care of that course, and she has written a blog. So once you are done with this video, I would say go on the website, go on the blog section, and read the difference between progressive and rolling wave planning. I can challenge you that you would simply love that. And if you still have doubts, send me an email. I'll make sure that you understand the difference between progressive and rolling wave. Now, let's talk about the different levels of planning. We'll start at a very high level, which is the portfolio level. From the portfolio, let's say, like for instance, I have a portfolio of IT certifications. Right, that's my portfolio where I train different like ACP, PMP, Scrum, Six Sigma, ITL, and I don't know, so many there are. But out of that, most important, this portfolio, my product is this simulator, which is this PMP simulator. That is my product. Now, so many times my students come to me and say that, hey Varun, it would be great if you add this release into this, or add this feature into this. I just don't straight away go in and add that feature. We plan it at a release level. So we have like let's say we have release like more like bi-weekly, weekly, but our major releases are like at a quarter level, a quarterly, like 4 major releases. Then from there we will have different iterations. In the different iterations, like 2 to 3 week sprints, we will keep on continuously adding more features and stuff like that. And finally, we will do a very, very granular level of planning, which is the daily planning, which is your daily stand-up. If you see, 15 minutes, that is also. So we'll go at that level, starting from a very high level. Now, from the product perspective, we will have the product vision statement. From the vision statement, like for instance, Varun, if you ask me, Varun, what is your vision for your PMP simulator? My vision would be that this PMP product, this PMP simulator is in hands of each and every person who's preparing for PMP. That's my vision. How can I achieve that vision? That would come at the product roadmap level, that this is at the roadmap level, and this is what we are, like 6 months, this is what we'll do. 9 months, this is what we will achieve. 1 year, we will have a world dominance. That is at a roadmap level. From the roadmap level, we will have the release plan. We will have, in order to do a world dominance in 1 year, I'll have different releases. I will have to get breakthrough features which makes my product as the best product. That's my release plan. And even further down, I'll go to the iteration plan, which is like your 2 to 3 weeks of iteration we will do. Now, but there is a closed loop between iteration and release plan. And you may ask me that, Varun, why there is a closed loop? Let's say we did a 2-week sprint, and in that 2-week sprint, I gave you 10 features to be implemented. But because of XYZ reason, you are only able to manage 8 features. What would happen to those two new features? You will actually move it to a different iteration. And that may impact my release, which is at a little more higher level. So there could, or let's say there is a big change that I don't want those 2 features anymore. So there could be a closed loop between iteration plan and the release plan. As you all know, Varun, why don't you give your real life examples, and that's where I'm best at, because I want to make sure you understand these topics you can closely relate to. Now, I'm pretty sure I'm not a good sushi chef, but on the screen, which you will see is an example of sushi, which my chef, or let's say Varun is a chef. So Varun is cooking us sushi for you. What are the different cycles I would use to give you the world's best sushi? That's my end goal is. First, we will have our 0 iteration. What is 0 iteration? This is at a preparation level. Like I'll try to see that, oh, you know what? I need eggs. I need shrimp. I need fish. And so I'll just, have different balls, and I'll keep all those things. But this is just at a preparation level. I have not started to work yet. Now, let's work towards my work items or deliverable. My iteration 1 would be where I'm cutting all the veggies. I'm just the cutting part. Then, after the iteration 1, I will probably move to iteration 2, where I will have a mixture, and I'll probably put it on the, in olive oil, whatever. Then from the iteration 2, I'll move to the iteration 3, where I will make sure that, sushi takes its shape, it is perfect, it's coming out together. So my customer is not seeing that because I am in the kitchen, but let's say another chef or my boss is seeing that, is Varun making a good sushi or not. So after iteration 3, it's my iteration 4, where I am putting that sushi into the plate, which I'm gonna, serve it to my customer. Let's say you are my customer. After the iteration 4, I would have my hardening iteration. A lot of people ask me, Varun, what is this hardening iteration? And of course, I'll be talking about all these in detail. But hardening iteration is before you deploy something, you will just make sure you will set up the environment properly. Like in this, my sushi example, I will make sure it is perfect, it is decorated and all those things. So I'm just putting the things together. That's it. I'm not designing it. I'm not decorating it. My final stage, which could be, let's say, my iteration 5, could be my deployment, which is at this deployment stage, the server is taking that sushi plate and giving it to the customer, and our end goal is that customer loves this sushi, the world's best sushi made by me, made by Varun. But I don't know how to make the sushi, so don't quote me and say that, hey, Varun, cook a sushi for me. No, I'm not going to do that because I don't know. This is just for an example I gave you. Let's see. Okay, iteration 0. What was my iteration 0? Just, getting things prepared. I'm not starting the preparation, it's just the basic preparation work. So this is known as the basic preparation before we actually start the work. Okay, like in this case, let's say if you're dealing with contractors and stuff, we'll have the project procurements in place, all the approvals and stuff like that. Overall, my team and I, everybody knows the basic objectives, why we are making this sushi. We'll start talking about the design discussion, but at a very high level. Okay, then we'll talk about setting up the work environment and stuff. So lab setups and service configuration, that's in IT world, but in general also, like, making sure that, the restaurant is in place. I have all the little bit of things I need for sushi and all those things. So that's my 0th iteration, the basic preparation before starting the work. Opposite of 0th iteration is your hardening iteration. Now, hardening iteration is one step before deployment. What do I mean by that is, before I deploy my work to the production, I'll put all those sushi in the plate. I've not decorated it yet, but everything is together. It's final check to make sure that system is stable, the quality is perfect. If my users need a user guide or installation guide, and I have that ready, any training or marketing material, final integration testing to make sure that all the different pieces are together. So all those configurations are in place. That is known as your hardening iteration. From hardening iteration, let's talk about the levels of planning. As I told you, first we have the product vision statement, and from there we'll move to roadmap, release, iteration, then there is a closed loop. Let's see what product vision statement is. It is an elevator statement describing the overall purpose of the project, who will and why use it, how the products support the company strategy. Like, let's take an example of that restaurant which I gave you, the sushi restaurant, where that was just at a very granular level. But let's assume I want to open a restaurant, and in that I want to have 3 different products. First is the appetizers. So in that appetizers, I am having 5 to 6 appetizers. Then I have the main course. In the main course I have 8-10 dishes, and finally I have the dessert and stuff. So my product vision statement will talk about the overall purpose of this. Overall purpose is to open the world's best sushi place. Okay, who will use it? People like you and I will use this sushi place. If you eat fish and other things, seafood, then how this particular sushi restaurant, like this particular product, which is, let's say, my main course, how this is helping my company strategy. What is my company strategy? World dominance. I want to make sure that in 1 year or 2 years time frame, my restaurant is the best restaurant among best sushi restaurant, right? That's my product vision statement. It will talk about the product future, who will be your customers, what they would need, how my sushi restaurant will meet those needs. All that information would be in the product vision statement. We'll have to see who my customer are, what they need, what are the product goals. Competition is a very important. A lot of people ask me, so always remember, in the vision statement you also talk about the competition. This is something which is the responsibility of the product owner. And let's say we have another sushi restaurant which is 10 miles from where I live. Not from where I live, from where my restaurant is, but that's my competition. I want to see that how their restaurant is, like what are the loopholes in their restaurant and how I can overcome those loopholes, differentiators. What is something I'm giving extra? Am I just giving that appetizer, main course, dessert, or am I giving something new? All those are part of my product vision statement. Just if you talk about PMP, I don't need to give you that example, but when I started this PMP teaching, first thing, what I did? I went to my competitor's website and I bought their product. There are so many people who do these videos and stuff, but I did the same. I listened to each and every person's video, not every person, I mean the popular ones, and I see what their loophole is. Why their videos are selling the most. How can I be the differentiator? Then I improved my work. Then I came up with my differentiating factor. And that's where we are right now. You're watching my videos and I'm assuming you're liking it. So that's your product vision statement. Now, product vision statement is for my target customer, who my target customer is. Right now for my restaurant is like people like you and me. Okay. What is my opportunity? I saw that in my area there was one sushi restaurant that was not good. So I sense an opportunity. That is why I made it. Then we will have the product for who? The product owner. Basically the product owner is coming up with this product vision statement, right? And it is a category of my sushi restaurant. There could be a different, let's say I have an Indian restaurant also. So the product category in that is Indian. Let's say I have an American restaurant, I have an Italian restaurant. All those are my different product categories. That, what are the key reasons to buy my sushi? Come to my sushi restaurant. That is also unlike what other sushi restaurants are not giving. Like they don't give a free dessert. My restaurant gives that, right? Or product is basically that statement of differentiation which says that XYZ restaurants are not giving that and I'm giving that. So that's your sample for who the is that unlike our product. Okay, so we come up with a sample. Now I discussed about the product vision statement. Now let's go at a little more granular level, which is my product roadmap. Product roadmap is high level view of the product features to support the product vision. What was my product vision? My product vision was world dominance in 1 year. What was my world dominance? That I have different chains of my sushi restaurant. That's my, how will I achieve it? It's through my product roadmap. What all features am I giving? So product roadmap ultimately supports your product vision. So let's see. First of all, keep that in mind. It's still the product owner's responsibility to come up with that roadmap. He or she will include that release schedule, because after the roadmap, we have a planning at a release level. So we will include the release schedule. Then from there, we will prioritize and categorize those requirements. I'll say these are the 10 requirements. And from that, I'll tell you that out of these 10, this one is the top, and I'll probably do it in a descending order or something. We'll define the backbone and walking skeleton in the roadmap. Don't worry about backbone and walking skeleton. It's a very important concept. I've explained that. So just hold on for a while. But just imagine backbone. What is? You cannot walk if you don't have a backbone, right? That's exactly we have a backbone for the product. And I'll explain you in detail. Then walking skeleton, which is, which helps you to walk. So what are the features in that which will help your product to walk? That's the walking skeleton. I just gave you a hint. Hold on, please. I'll definitely explain you this topic in detail. Now, ultimately, the team will contribute and support the product owner in this. But the ultimate responsibility of the roadmap is of the product owner. Then you would see visually you would see the releases and feature set. Like if you're using a Kanban board, you will see that these are the stuff which we are doing and this has been done. So you will visually see that. Then after that, ultimately it's the product owner's responsibility to make all the strategy and tactical decisions. You start a product and you say that, hey, you know what, this doesn't look nice. Then we will probably go ahead and change it. So you will revisit it. So often, like, revisit annually. It just depends. Not necessarily annually. It just depends from company to company, product to product. Like for me, we revisit our product at a, more frequent, not annually. Now, a lot of people ask me this difference also, that Varun, what is the difference between product roadmap and a product backlog? So product backlog is the real set of requirements. Roadmap is more of a high level strategic document. Roadmap will show you that how through different releases, this is what we will achieve. Backlog will tell you the list of requirements that will actually give value to the customer. Roadmap will give the direction to the backlog, and backlog is the one which will contains your stories, epics, and all those things. Now, in the traditional world, if you know about BRD and functional, non-functional requirements, your requirements document can be treated as a backlog in Agile. So backlog is the word which we use in Agile. Once again, we completed the vision statement, we completed the roadmap, we talked about the difference between roadmap and backlog, and now we will move to the release plan. Okay, release plan. Still, I would say that we are still at a high level. Release plan, let's say I want to do 3 or 4 releases a year. So it will tell you that in these 3-4 releases, these are the list of features which we will implement. And on top of that, between the releases, we will have different multiple iterations. So each release will have multiple iterations. Let's say if it's a quarterly and I am doing quarterly release and I am doing 2-week sprint, most likely I would have around 6 to 7 sprints in that in that quarter. Okay, we will constantly update our plan just to make sure that if the customer needs are changing, but this changes will come from the product owner who is the representative of your customer. Team velocity and story maps are also used. We will talk about velocity and story maps in some time. So, just hold on to that. But I'll tell you, velocity is like, the amount of work you are achieving in a particular iteration, and it may increase or decrease depending upon the things. Now, after that, the user stories are actually clubbed together into backbone, as I told you, and walking skeleton. I'll explain that in detail. So please hold on. All these are very important topics, and I want to do justice in explaining that. Now, my output for the release planning would be the release backlog. Release backlog, and who all are part of it? The product owner, the scrum master, dev team, and the all the key stakeholders would be part of the release planning. And our purpose is that we will have a release backlog in place which will depict the different releases, the iterations within them, those releases, and a tentative timeline. When we should do it? It occurs at the beginning of new project and revisited before every release or with each iteration. So after you do an iteration, you just make sure that understand, is my release still on track, or are there any changes? So we constantly do that. So that's the planning at a release level. Now let's go into the more granular level, which is your iteration planning. Okay, and of course, your output will be your backlog, sprint backlog, or which is more commonly used. Who does it? The iteration, you have the product owner, the scrum master, dev team, all 3 people are part of it. And basically, the releases we planned at the now we will have those user features, the user stories that will go into this particular iteration plan. So let's say I have a 2-week sprint. I will say that in this 2-week sprint, I will give this 10 features, 10 user stories basically. And it's not necessary that one user story is equal to one feature. No, one feature can be decomposed into multiple user stories also. So it just depends. When this will happen? It's like occurs at the beginning of every sprint. I would say like, every 2 weeks or something like that, you will do it if it's a 2-week sprint. And this is something which is a time boxed meeting. What does time box mean? You will set up a fixed time. Like for instance, I will say that this should not be more than 1 hour. Okay. Then this will depend upon the velocity of the team. As I told you, velocity is the amount of story points the team is completing in a particular iteration, and that will continuously change or something, which will help you to do a planning that, or release is not getting pushed or something. 0th iteration, of course, we talked about it, and our hardening iteration also we talked about it. They will also become part of this. So we will do all those things as well. Now, iteration planning is a subset of your release planning. Keep that in mind. So if iteration planning is the subset of release planning, this means the story sizing, the task, and all those are actually done. So basically you decompose the user story into tasks. All that is part of your iteration planning. Then from there we will have the release planning. What is this? This is at a little more high level, which is your high level epics and big features. That's at a release level. For iteration planning, your scheduled development is happening at a much lower level, like 2-week sprint or something. For your release, it is at a high level. So keep that in mind. Okay, so this covered the first section of your planning. I hope you liked it, but we are still not done. The other more important, not more is a wrong word, sorry, I take that back, but the other important topic in the planning is our planning tools like plan, do, check, act, Deming's cycle. What do you mean by time boxing? We will talk about that. Then we will talk about the kickoff meeting. Okay guys, write down kickoff meeting. Very, very, very important for your PMP exam. You will get many questions on this topic. Then we will move to definition of done. What is that? Work in progress limits, daily stand up. I know if someone is just new to agile culture, this is I would say the basic thing everybody knows about this. Daily stand up. Okay, like I'll give you one real life scenario also. I was working on one of the project, and what they were planning to do is they wanted to move to agile, but they don't know how agile is done. So the only thing which they implemented was daily stand up, and that daily stand up used to be for 30 minutes. Why am I silent? Because of this reason. It was for 30 minutes. So people, those who don't know how to plan for it, these are the people who make those mistakes, and I'll talk about that. And finally, the last topic which I will be discussing is your product backlog grooming. Something we will talk. So first we have the plan, do, check, act, PDCA cycle. And on this one, I would say it's actually it's a real life example I'll give you. As always, Varun with his real life examples. McDonald's, they wanted to introduce a new burger in the market. So what they did was a new milkshake or something, I don't know, but one product in the market. What they did was they planned that, hey, you know what? We will implement this burger in one of the outlets of McDonald's. Then they checked, they saw how people are responding to that new product, and finally when they saw that people are liking this, then they acted upon it, and then they launched the same burger or product or milkshake in all of their outlets. They used plan, do, check, act. You can use it for new product, or you could use it from the improvement standpoint also, if you want to improve a particular process or something. So that's your plan, do, check, act. The second tool which is highly used in your agile is your time boxing. What do I mean by time boxing is time boxing. You are having a boxing with time. No, nothing like that. It was a big bad PJ, sorry, my bad. so sorry. Time boxing is you set up a time limit. You say that after this we will not, like for instance or videos, right? I don't expect people to watch 10 videos together in a day. Why? After some time, you will not be productive. So I will say that, okay, just to make sure you are productive, watch 3-4 videos a day, make notes out of it. Okay, so time is allocated to an event, and that activity is completed within that time. If that task is not completed within that limit, then it is left as is. Yes, if you have 10 things to be covered in 1 hour and you only did 8, you will not do the remaining 2. You will do it later. That's the importance of time boxing. Now you will say that, Varun, how is it important? We didn't discuss about those 2 items. No, I'm not saying that you're not discussing it or you are ignoring it. You might do it in a later phase or something else, but time boxing makes sure that you are productive and you complete everything within that time slot. That's the time boxing. When people come to me and the first question I ask them is, where do you want to give the exam? When do you want to give it? Do you want to give it in 2 months, 3 months? Some people say that, hey Varun, I want to give it by end of this year. Okay. You know what my response is? If you are into this category, you need to think straight. 1 year or end of this year, that's not going to happen. You have to have a specific time boxing for that. Kickoff meeting, another important topic. As I told you, very, very, very important. Kickoff meeting. So this is a meeting which is scheduled to discuss the roles and responsibilities, get the team members' commitment, and communicate the project objectives. Kickoff meeting. We want to make sure before we start anything, like for instance, these series of videos which I'm giving it to you, we had a kickoff meeting. We had a plan that these are the things I want to make sure each of my team member, it's not just me who's recording this video. Right now in this room, even I have 10 people who are helping. 10 would be a little higher number, but I'm just telling you, there are so many people who are helping me to make sure that this video is the best. Okay, why do you need this? We want to make sure, I have my right team with me. We want to make sure that my team knows what the vision is and all those things. So what really we do it in the kickoff meeting, we make sure that the team charter is defined, the vision statement is defined. We talk about, we help the product owner or business analyst to document those user stories, estimation. So we're not doing it. It's just setting up the layout and the structure, I would say, in the kickoff meeting. Now, this is a very important statement. If in your exam, they specifically ask you that when is the kickoff meeting conducted, then your answer should be considered for the large projects, which is in the execution stage. Basically, the beginning of execution stage, you do for the large projects. For the small projects, it's actually done it in the planning process, just like in the beginning of planning. If they have not given in the question, then you will assume it's a large/complex project. But if they have given specifically and the question is when it is conducted, for small projects is beginning of planning, for large projects it is beginning of execution. Keep that in mind, very important topic. Okay, then next tool we have is the definition of done. What do I mean by, you all know what done is, right? Done means work getting complete. Same logic when a story is done/complete. Now your definition of done might be different as compared to my definition of done, right? For everyone that done could differ. So what we will do is the team will write this definition of done at the back of a user story. What do I mean by back of a user story? So let's say if you have written a user story on a sticky note. So at the back of the sticky note, you will write the definition of done, which means that if this is complete, 100% of my work is complete. Okay, so it will be defined for all your user stories, iteration, releases and everything. You will have a definition of done in place. Just example, like for instance, code completed with proper comments, unit test passed, unit test written, build has been made. So it's more like a checklist kind of a thing, but with a very specific definition of done for each of those user stories, to be honest. There are some 3 more tools we have. We have the work in progress limit. Work in progress limit is like in the Kanban board. It was to do, doing or in progress, and finally done. What did we do over there? We put a limit on the doing status in the progress that any particular team member cannot take more than 2 to 3 user stories at a time. So we put a specific restriction on that. I don't want that, my team members just keep all the work on them and, they start working on it and they don't finish it. It's not giving me any value into it. So I have set up a work in progress limit that they should not have more than 2 user stories at a single time. That's your work in progress limit. Then we all know what daily stand-up is. 15-minute meeting where you discuss 3 things. A, your what did you achieve yesterday? B, what you are planning to do today? C is, do you have any issues or risks? Only these 3 things. If anything specific needs to be discussed, it would be outside that 15-minute window. Last tool I have is the backlog grooming or refinement. What does grooming means? Grooming means, you're constantly making sure that right user stories have the right priorities assigned to them, and you are constantly updating it. Things change so quickly. That is the reason why I constantly update my question set, is because things are changing. If PMI starts giving priority to one particular set of questions, I will at the same time go in my database of questions and I'll start improving that too. For me, that's my backlog grooming, refinement. Priorities change, things change. You want to make sure your backlog is always have the right user stories with the right priorities defined in that. So that's your backlog grooming / refinement. Okay, so here we are in the end of this video. I hope you liked it. You learned some new things, but this is just the beginning. Slowly and gradually, we'll start moving into detail. Now, you all know my traditional way. In this particular topic, I'll explain you that what were the things which were very, very important. So like for instance, zero and hardening iteration, very, very important. Make sure you know the difference between those two. A lot of questions on that. Focus on the kickoff meeting. PMI's favorite. So many questions on kickoff meeting. We will talk about the agile planning tools which we discussed, work in progress, daily stand-up, a little bit of structure, and finally the difference between release and iteration plan as well. So this marks the completion of agile planning video, an important video where I gave you a basic structure. Now I will move to the most important agile methodology, which is known as Scrum. So I'll give you the how we do Scrum planning, where we will talk about different roles, the sprint review, retrospective, and some of the most popular artifacts. So see you there. Thank you. Hey guys, welcome back. So last video we discussed about the agile planning. I could have covered this particular video in the agile planning as well, but I specifically didn't do that. Why? Because this video is about Scrum. Whenever people used to talk about agile, the first thing which comes in their mind is about Scrum. As per them, Scrum is agile, which is absolutely right. I'm not denying that. But where we are not completely correct is that it is Scrum, it is Kanban, it is Lean, it is extreme programming. So there are so many different agile methodologies, but most important out of all is Scrum. So this video is about Scrum planning. So let's see, what do we have in this? Initially, I'll give you the introduction for Scrum, basically what Scrum is. I'll explain you the step-by-step Scrum process. Very, very important. I really want you to listen carefully to this because that is where the main confusion is. You have to connect the dots, and as you know, I'm a visual person. I explain all these things by connecting small dots so that you never forget in your life. So Scrum process is something which we will discuss. Then we will talk about the Scrum roles like Scrum Master, Product Owner, Team Member. So we'll talk about those. Then I will move to the Sprint Review and Sprint Retrospective. Review the initial planning, retrospective, the lessons learned. We'll talk about those. And finally, I will talk about the artifacts, Scrum artifacts, the most popular artifacts which we create in the Scrum process. Last but not the least, it is Scrum of Scrum, kind of just a 2-minute topic, but yes, we will talk about that as well. So let's see, what do we have? So what is Scrum? As I told you, Scrum is the most popular agile methodology. It is most popular, and it is adaptive, iterative, fast and flexible. All these are good, good characteristics of Scrum. The main focus is, on delivering early and continuously. So I want to make sure if I'm the customer, I get my product pretty quickly, and most importantly, quality is not compromised. So that is what Scrum gives you. And it is based upon the 3 pillars, and which I will talk about that in detail: the transparency, inspection, and adaptation. So let's see, what do we have? So this is our Scrum process, the step-by-step process. If you remember, in my last video, I told you we start from the portfolio level, then we move to the product vision. From product vision, I went to the release planning, then the iteration planning, and then we went through the daily planning. In this end-to-end Scrum process, first we have the project business case. Now, project business case is why we are actually doing this project. That is where we actually start. From there, we create the project vision statement. Project vision statement is that for this particular project, what is my vision? If I'm building a product, if I'm building a service, what is my vision for that? From there, we will move to the product backlog. So in product backlog, what we will do is we will write down all the requirements, basically what exactly we need for this. So that will come as a part of your product backlog, which will of course be prioritized. Now, from that product backlog, you also have to remember that those product backlog is divided into different releases. So first we have, let's say I have a 6 months release. In that 6 month release, I would have that product backlog, which will have that, okay, in this 6 month, these are the things which are going. In the other 6 months, these are the things which are going. But if I have to go at a more granular level, then that is where the sprint backlog comes into picture. What is sprint backlog? So I will take my user stories, basically my requirements from my product backlog, and I would say that, okay, these 10 will go in sprint number 1. These 5 will go in sprint number 2. These 15 will go into sprint number 3. So I will, and of course this is based upon the priority. Whatever is my priority, we will first work on the priority items. So those sprint, and automatically, let's say it's a 2-week sprint. Then after every 2 weeks, we will have a sprint review meeting, which is my retrospective, where my customer, product owner I as a team member will show my product to the customer, and the customer or product owner, they will accept the deliverable which we have. If they want any changes, they will ask us to go back and make those changes. Of course, we'll have to prioritize. So that is why you will see that from sprint review meeting, it will go back to the product backlog, because things might change. Or if, let's say, if I have not completed all my user stories which were part of that sprint, then again it will went back to my product backlog and again reprioritize. So there is a chain of between back and forth between that. Yeah, that's the end-to-end process. Let's see how we do it. Now I will actually explain you this step-by-step process. So first of all, Scrum is both iterative and incremental. Remember, in my life cycle video, in the first video, I explained you the difference between the iterative life cycle and incremental life cycle. What was incremental? Incremental was, the basic purpose of incremental is I want to deliver something fast. And that, we will deliver, okay, now the next work is done, I'll deliver it after next, then third, then fourth. So I will do this as a step-by-step in increments. Iterative is I'm making one thing, I'm continuously doing it again and again unless it is perfect. So that's your iteration. These deliverables are done in different cycles, and which we call it as sprints. The most common terminology, sprint is something, typically we use 2-week sprint, but it depends. It could be 1 to 4 weeks. It depends from project to project and from organization to organization. After every sprint, a ready product is delivered to the customer. That's what our main focus is. that if we have a 2-week sprint, after that 2-week sprint, even if it's a one new feature addition, that's a new deliverable, right? That is what we will do. It's the job of the product owner to represent the customer interests. So product owner will wear that customer hat, kind of, and product owner will get all the requirements, write them in the form of user stories, which will ultimately become part of your product backlog. Or Scrum team or product owner and Scrum master will together plan together for our first sprint. They will decide the duration of the sprint, whether it is 2 weeks, 4 weeks, and what all user stories will go into that. Now, of course, product owner will give us the priority. I'm not saying that, but once the priority is decided, Varun as a team member or a Scrum master will take those and will start working on those. This is something which we will discuss in the sprint planning meeting, which happens in the beginning, okay, of the sprint. Then, as I told you, the duration remains fixed. Like for instance, if I'm making a 2-week sprint, I don't want that my next sprint would be 3 weeks. No, it will be 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. So that's how we target for. After a sprint planning meeting, we have our sprint backlog, which will contain all the user stories which should be delivered in this particular sprint. Then each story will have a story point. What does I mean? What do I mean by story point? Story point is that, let's say if this particular feature or a user story will take 2 days, and I won't say 2 days, I will say 2 points. For me, 1 point mean 1 day, but you don't have, we don't talk in days or hours and stuff. We just talk about it's relative. That's 2 story points, 4 story points, 6 story points, and things like that. So once we have all those stories in the sprint decided, then we will move to get the work done on a daily basis. We will have the 15-minute daily stand-up meeting. I explained you what daily stand-up meeting is, what we did yesterday, what we are doing today, and what are our issues and stuff. Then any major discussions and anything will be taken care after the daily stand-up meeting, and it could be mutual time and everything could be decided. Then in that 2-week sprint, again, it's not necessary it would be 2 weeks, it could be 4 weeks, it could be 3 weeks, it just depends. But let's say it's a 2-week sprint. After the end, we will have the sprint review meeting, where we will discuss about how that sprint went, whether we were able to deliver it or not. We will show it to the customer, we'll demo it to the customer, basically your product owner, and product owner will give the feedback whether they approve it, reject it, and things like that. Okay, if there are any changes, it will go to the product backlog, where it will be reprioritized. Team, they will also talk about in that meeting, the sprint retrospective meeting, basically, that what will be done in the future. So sprint retrospective meeting is what are the things which went well, what are the things which did not went well, and moving forward what we will do. Okay, so it's the job of the product owner to make sure that for the next sprint the product backlog is correct, it's absolutely right, and what are things which are required to go into the next sprint would also be discussed over there. Okay, as I told you, there are 3 basic characteristics of Scrum pillars. We have transparency, inspection, and the third one we have is the adaptation. Now let's start with transparency. What do I mean by transparency? Be open, share the data, give visibility, common understanding of definition of done. What do I mean by that? Be open. Whatever you are doing, everyone over there, you have to be transparent. It's not that the team or you or other people are working in silo. It has to be together as one. Simple. Give visibility, show it to the people that this is the work you are doing. It could be through common areas. You are showing it. Information radiators. I'll talk about that. So it has to be transparent. Simple as that. Next, we have inspection. As we all know what inspection is, verify for the correctness. check the progress, like on a daily basis. You have daily stand-up, so you're basically checking it on a daily basis. If there are issues, identify those variances. So transparency, in addition, inspection. Last but not the least, it is your adaptation. What do I mean by adaptation is, Agile is all about, adapting to changes. You are very open to changes in that. If there were any issues, you have to implement those lessons learned in the subsequent sprint. So you have to take that. You have to take preventive actions. You have to take corrective actions. So all that is part of your Scrum pillar. So transparency, inspection, and adaptation. Okay, Scrum values. We have openness. As I told you, you all are working as one cohesive unit. It's not that you're working in silos. You should have trust on each other. That's very, very important. Trust factor is courageous. If you did something wrong, be courageous and say that, okay, I did wrong. That's absolutely fine. And it's not about individual. It is about team performance. Then you have focus. You have to make sure that you are focused on your end goal, which is whatever user stories which are required, they have, to be part of the sprint, deliver it. And finally, commitment. Commit to the work. Make sure that, what you have, you are doing those stuff. Okay. Now, this entire Scrum, what I have done is I have divided into different types, like I have divided into roles. First, we will talk about roles. From roles, I'll show you the different types of meetings. I just briefly told you about sprint review meeting, the retrospective, so we'll talk about that. From meetings, we'll go to the artifacts. That's important, what all artifacts are used in Scrum. And finally, we will talk about some of the other things like, tools and Scrum of Scrums and all those things. So all those 4 pieces would be discussed. Now, I would say the second most important keyword or the second most important feature in Scrum is your sprint. Not just in Scrum, in Agile overall, I would say. A lot of people talk about that, what is a sprint? Why do you use? So this is like the initial basic definition. You should know what sprint is. As if you see this, sprint means that 100-meter sprint. I used to be a sprinter in my college days, and I used to run a lot, but now it's a little different story. So what is a sprint? Sprint is a short time box in which the Scrum team works and delivers the agreed deliverable. It could be a 2-week sprint, it could be a 3-week, it could be a 4-week sprint. So it just depends upon your project to project. It's basically short release cycles are done, and the basic purpose of doing that is that you get constant feedback from your customer, from your product owner. Okay, as I told you, it should be between like 1 to 4 weeks. Typically it is 2-week sprint. Okay, the more complex the work and the more unknowns, the shorter the sprint should be. So yes, this is actually opposite. You would have thought that if it is very complex, there are so many unknowns, then I would make a longer sprint. No, it's absolutely wrong. And I'll give you the rationale behind it. If it is, let's say, too complicated, you don't want to work for 4 weeks and then come to know that, hey, you didn't do right. Instead, you would prefer to do it for 1 week and see, because in more complex, things are changing a lot, and more information is getting clarified. So all that is taken care. And finally, all the Scrum events from planning to retrospective occur during this sprint period. So 2-week sprint, you will start with planning, and the last would be your sprint retrospective. So next is your user story. So in that particular sprint, you will decide that these are the user stories which are required to be complete. 5 user stories, 10 user stories, or whatever. Now, sprint duration is fixed. We decided that, right? It is a 2-week sprint. Now, we are deliberately putting this constraint to make sure that, team is focused on delivering fast and getting early feedback. Okay. Now, it's your job as a product owner to make sure that the type of user story you have written, it should be completed within 1 sprint itself. If it is not possible, then this means you have to decompose that user story even further. Once again, if the project is complex, then there are a lot of unknowns, the shorter the sprint should be. Keep that in mind. It's a very important statement. Now, in the Scrum roles, we have 3 different types of Scrum roles. We have the product owner, development team, and Scrum master. Product owner is, he or she is the customer's representative. Scrum master, the person who will make sure that the team is following the agile values and principles. And finally, we have the development team, people who are actually doing the work. So these are the 3 different types of Scrum roles. Let's go back to my sushi example, which I gave you yesterday. If you remember, I want to open a restaurant, right? In my restaurant, I have different roles, which is, one is the product owner. Product owner is, let's say, Varun as the CEO of that sushi restaurant. Varun, the main head chef. Varun is the product owner. Why? Varun is thinking from the end user, which is basically the customers who will come in to dine. He is thinking from their perspective and giving the list of requirements, like the table setting should be like this, the cloth should be like this, these are the stuff which is decorative and stuff like that. And then we have a Scrum Master. Scrum Master is like, I would say, for this entire project, I have assigned a Scrum Master or a project manager who will make sure that the team is doing what is expected out of them. He or she will make sure that we are following the Scrum values and stuff. And finally, we have the development team, which is the bartender, the different chef, the kitchen staff, the server, the receptionist, and then someone who will come to do the decoration, artistic, and all those things. All those are part of your Scrum roles. Let's go into each one of them one by one. So first we have is the product owner. First of all, as I told you, product owner, representative of the customer. In your example, it's Varun, who is the CEO of that sushi restaurant. What is Varun's job? To make sure that Varun has proper, thorough understanding of users, customers, competition, marketplace, and direction the domain is taking. So in this case, I should know that what my end user, my customers need. What is my competition? Which is the nearest sushi restaurant, or which is the most popular sushi restaurant, right? So I have to take care of all those things. I want to make sure that as a product owner, I have to make sure that the customer vision communication of the needs and wishes to the team. What do I mean by that? If my end user, someone who is coming to my restaurant, has some issues, is not happy, or wants something new, he or she will tell me, and I will lay it forward to my team to make sure that we implement. It's like someone came to my restaurant and said that, hey Varun, why don't you have, start serving alcohol also? Just add more cocktails or mocktails into your menu. I'll say, okay, that's a good thought process. Okay, let me see how I can make that possible. So that's a customer vision which was communicated to me, who is the product owner, to take it forward. Okay, then as I told you, what are my responsibilities? Drive development towards product vision, ensuring valuable delivery. Yes, we'll start from we will lay the foundation from the beginning till the very end when my sushi restaurant is fully functional. Okay, I will ensure a constant watch and understanding of the customer and marketplace. So if, let's say, one of my competitor came up with something new when I'm still in the development stage, I will probably like to implement something even better than that, right? So I would be taking care of the market around me, understanding, I'll probably survey a lot of customers around there. Okay, and regularly and continuously, I will do the backlog grooming, product backlog. Keep that in mind. If things are changing, my product backlog should also be updated. So that's why we do product backlog grooming. And if there are any questions of my team members regarding any of the user stories, it should be my job to make sure that I clarify those with them. Okay, now the second is my powerhouse, What do I mean by powerhouse? My development team, the people who will actually do the work, the developer, the tech testers, the UI, UX, DBA, system architect, DevOps, business analyst, security specialist. So this is a typical example of an IT world, but I know not everyone is from the IT world. And agile is something which is used across the board, not just for IT. A lot of people have this misconception that agile is only used in IT. No, agile started from IT, but that does not mean that it is only for IT. It is actually across the board. So this example, that's why you see a lot of things IT, like testers, system architect and DevOps and stuff. But let's go back to our sushi example so that you can relate it. I have, my receptionist, my kitchen staff, my decorator who will work, someone who will, the bartender, if I have a DJ in place. So all those are my team members, because they are my construction people, because they are doing the construction. Somebody from, the paint team who will be painting my sushi restaurant. So all that is my development team. So what is the responsibility of a team? First of all, it should be between 3 to 9 team members. Again, it is an ideal size. I'm not saying it should be more than 9, but I'm saying it can be more or it cannot be. Just the ideal is 3 to 9. Okay, and they will be developing and delivers the committed story in the sprint. So whatever I say that these are the 10 features I need, these are the people who will do that for me. Okay. Self-organizes to determine which work to pick and deliver. What do I mean by self-organizes? I, as the product owner, would not tell them what to do. I will just tell them the priority, that these are the 5 things which are priority. Then it is their job to make sure that is done. They will pick up the right user stories in order to complete those 10 prioritized features which were part of my product backlog. And it should be cross-functional. What do I mean by cross-functional? This means from different team members, there is a representative and they are working together to deliver the result. So the Scrum Master, okay, next, the third person, most important person we have is the Scrum Master. What is the job of the Scrum Master? Ensure Scrum values and practices are embedded in the team culture. All of my team members are following the Scrum values and principles. That's the job of the Scrum Master. Let's say in my sushi restaurant, I have employed a Scrum Master / project manager who is making sure that the team is working on their what they were supposed to do it. They're following the Scrum values. It's he or she is more like a coach and a process owner, telling them this is how agile functions. Okay, if there are any impediments, let's say we were doing our sushi restaurant, we came to know that we need some kind of approval from the local authorities. Okay, so it's the job of the Scrum Master to make sure that we get the required approval to take it forward. Protects the team from disturbances, specifically outside disturbances. Like for instance, let's say, your sponsor comes or your customer directly talks to your team member and say that, hey, why don't you do this? No, this is not how it should be done. The customer should actually work with the product owner, which is me. Then Varun should relay it to the team members, and from there they should take it forward. So it's the job of the Scrum Master to protect the team from outside disturbances. Basically, though, they don't have a real authority, because those, like for instance, the kitchen staff will report to the kitchen manager, right? Similarly, the serving staff will report to the serving manager. So it's not necessary that they will all report to that Scrum Master, because typically it is cross-functional. So keep that in mind. So Scrum Master role towards the organization and product owner. So it was specifically, previously we just discussed that it was towards the team, but Scrum Master also plays an important role towards the organization and specifically the product owner. First of all, towards the organization, it's the job of the Scrum Master to make sure that everyone is aware about Scrum, how the agile principles works. Okay, if there are any other issues in the organization, regarding to Scrum implementation, he or she should come forward. He or she should not say that, hey, you know what, this is not my project, not my baby, so I'm not taking care of it. No. He or she should help the product owner to manage the backlog. Okay. He or she should help the product owner by, communicating the vision, goals, and details of the items, backlog items to the team. So basically, he or she is the bridge between the product owner and the team. So Scrum Master, as I told you, process owner, coach, impediment resolver, collaborator, team protector, problem solver, servant leader, and finally the community sense promoter. Yes, process owner, end-to-end process, coach, servant leader, very, very important. Some of my students have used this servant leader for me, because I think about people. So yeah, so that's the role of a Scrum Master. Now, the second section of this video is on Scrum meetings and ceremonies. Another very important, I would say, a lot of questions come from this particular section as well. So what are the different types of Scrum meetings? First, we have our sprint planning meeting. Then we have our daily Scrum, which is the daily stand-up. Then we have the sprint review. And finally, we have the sprint retrospective. So just to give you an idea about it, in sprint planning, we decide what all work, whatever things we would be covering in that particular sprint, all the user stories. Then on a daily basis, we will have a daily checkup kind of stuff, which is your daily Scrum. Finally, we have the sprint review, that how my particular sprint went. Basically, did I complete all these user stories or not? So things like, the sprint review, we'll have to give the demo to the customer and product owner. So the demo happens in the sprint review. And finally, we have the sprint retrospective, which is divided into two sections. First section, things which went well, things which did not went well, more like lessons learned. And the other half, what do we have to do it in the next sprint? So that is also covered in the sprint retrospective. So first we have the sprint planning, as I told you, beginning of sprint. So it is time box to 2 hours per week. Typically, you should not do more than 2 hours, like 1 hour 1 week, 1 hour next week. So you can do that. You will start with the sprint goal, which is basically the objective that you have to meet in that particular 2-week cycle. Then the second set would be the backlog items, which for that particular sprint, where you will add all the user stories which would be included in that particular sprint. And finally, we have the decomposition, which is those user stories are decomposed into tasks. And finally, the team will actually work on those tasks. Okay, let's see. So first, an event that defines what can be delivered in the upcoming sprint and how that work will be achieved. As I told you, these are the list of user stories I need, and this is how we will do it. Who all are involved? My entire development team, my Scrum Master, my product owner, all of them have to be part of the sprint planning meeting. Of course, we'll talk about the priority also, and ultimately all of these user stories should align to my sprint goal, which is basically the objective of that sprint. My output will be my sprint backlog, which means that these are the list of things which are required to be done in this particular 2-week sprint. Another important thing is that the team and the product owner, they both have to provide reciprocal commitment. What do we mean by reciprocal commitment? This means that the product owner will not change the sprint objective or change the requirements within the sprint. That is the commitment Varun as a product owner is giving to the team. And the team members are giving the commitment back that yes, we will complete what is expected out of them. So that is a reciprocal commitment. Okay, that's what I just discussed. Now, this is your sprint planning is done, right? Next, we will move to the daily stand-up. As I told you, 3 things. You have to answer only 3 questions. If something which doesn't get covered in that, it has to be a parking lot item. It should be same time, every day, same location, and not more than 15 minutes. What are the things which we did yesterday? What are the things which we are doing today? And finally, what are the obstacles, risks or impediments the team is following? You will not resolve that in that meeting. Keep that in mind. That has to be a parking lot item which would be covered in the later phase. Okay, let's see. As I told you, 15 minutes, 3 questions, it's just keep one more thing in mind that, it is not a status update. A lot of people think that daily stand-up is like a status. No, it is nothing about status as such. It's all about only those 3 questions. Secondly, the participants are specifically, standing to make sure that, the meeting is short and to the point. That's the whole reason of this. Okay, so we started with sprint planning. We had the output as the sprint backlog. Then we started working on a daily basis for 2 weeks. We had our daily stand-up, and now we are doing our sprint review. Basically, we have a sprint review meeting, which is a meeting which is at the end of my sprint to show what are the things which we accomplished during this. So that's my sprint review meeting. Okay, it is to be time boxed to 1 hour per week. Okay, so what is the basic purpose? As I told you, demo of working software. So the product owner will give the demo, make sure that team answers all the questions, queries and all those things he or she has. So the demo would be provided. Then user will input on the valuable items for the next sprint. So in this we will talk about what are the items which should be covered in your next sprint. So that is also covered in your sprint review meeting. Okay, let's see the step-by-step process. So first, PO will invite the Scrum team and all the stakeholders. Product owner will explain these are the things which are done, these are the things which are not done. The team will demonstrate the done items. Okay, and if there are any questions the product owner or the customer has it, then they will answer those things. The stakeholders and PO, basically the customer and the product owner, will accept or reject that, and team will also talk about the things which went well and if there were any obstacles and how they were overcome. PO, product owner, will share the product backlog and the entire group collaborates on what to do next. So basically, first half you talked about what all things you did in the sprint review, and the second half you talked about the items which should be covered next. Okay, so that's your step-by-step process for sprint. Then okay, so we still have there are attendees, Scrum team, Scrum master, product owner, customer, facilitator would be Scrum master. Keep that in mind. What should be the outcome of this meeting? Either the product owner will accept or reject and provide the reasons for both, whatever. It should be 1 hour per week. The sprint planning is 2 hours per week. This is 1 hour. Okay. If there are any changes, they will go back to the product backlog, again reprioritize, and from there it would be picked. So you will actually talk about the items which would be covered in the next sprint. So that is also covered in your sprint review. Okay, from there, the last meeting which you have in a particular sprint is your sprint retrospective. So in sprint retrospective, it's an event that occurs at the end of the sprint to reflect on how things went, what should be retained and what to improve. So this is more like your what are the things which I can improve in my future sprints basically. So let's see. It occurs just after your sprint review. Your facilitator should be Scrum Master. Same thing for sprint. The sprint review also your facilitator was Scrum Master, and the participants. So it is more of an internal, which is your team and Scrum Master. So it's more of an internal. PO is optional. product owner can come, product owner cannot come. So it just depends. Sometimes people think that retrospective is a lessons learned meeting or post-mortem meeting, which is absolutely right. Actually, there is little difference between that, but still you can say that it's a lessons learned meeting. So this one is time box to 3 hours per 1 month of sprint. So what do I mean by that is, more likely you will do 1.5 if it's a 2-week sprint. You will say 1.5 in this sprint and 1.5 hours in the next sprint. And what will be the outcome? We will get an improved plan for the next sprint. That is what we do. And finally, the improvement stories are taken up as non-functional stories. So you will add those story points in the backlog, and then they will be reprioritized as well. So sprint retrospective also contributes to your product backlog. So keep that in mind. I think in this video I told you that in sprint retrospective it is divided into 2 halves, where the first half is talking about the things which went well, things did not went well, and the second half is about what are the things which you will do it in the next sprint. That is not true. The true information is that you will only talk about the things which went well, the things which did not went well. The second half is actually part of your sprint review meeting, which makes more sense actually. So that makes more sense. So let's see. So it's a 5-step process, very important. First, set the stage. Set the stage is like, you all join in, you start talking about, things like, hey, how was the game last night? Did it go well and stuff? Then you will, after setting the stage, a lot of people actually omit this stage and straight away move to gather the data stage, but this is an important one. So you have to make sure there is an importance to set the stage, to make sure everyone is on the same page. They will all do the check-ins and stuff like that. Then you gather the data. From the data you will say that, okay, these were the number of story points we did, this was the velocity achieved, and things like that. From there you will generate the insights. You will have that, oh, you know what, this didn't go good, we can improve. Based upon your insights, you will decide on what you should do in the future. And finally, we will close the retrospective. If there is any improvement point or something, that will move to your product backlog. So this is your 5-step process in sprint retrospective. Very important. You may get a lot of questions in this. They will explain you the scenario and they will say, what should we do next? So keep that in mind. Set the stage, gather the data, generate insights, decide on what to do, and finally close the retrospective. Now, let's see the difference between retrospective and the sprint or iteration review which we did. So retrospective is more for the development team, more for the Scrum Master and stuff. Iteration review is more like the demo, right? So that is more towards, of course, the team members, but it is more towards the customer. In retrospective, the purpose is process improvement or any other changes and stuff which are required. In iteration review, it is more about the product or service which you are doing because you are giving the demo, and ultimately your goal is to get the acceptance on those deliverables, right? Now, third topic in the Scrum is your artifacts. So we have 3 artifacts. We have the product backlog, we have the sprint backlog, and we have the the product increment. Now, product backlog, as I told you, I already explained you what product backlog is. List of all the things which are required to be done. So it's a more like a high level document, I would say, but still at a detailed level. Sprint backlog is specifically very specific to that particular sprint. So let's say if you have 10 sprints, you will have you will constantly have those sprint backlogs in that. Then we have the product increment, like how your product is increasing, what are the things you did and stuff. So product increment is also an artifact, keep that in mind. A lot of people think that how can an increment be a artifact? No, product increment is also an artifact. So first we have the product backlog. So first, product backlog, it is the prioritized set of requirements. So all the requirements are written, which is in the form of user story, as I told you. If you can't do that user story in one particular sprint, then you have to decompose it into further. The responsibility of product backlog comes from the product owner. He or she should take care of it, and all types of requirements like functional, non-functional, features, security, whatever requirements like bugs, fixes, improvement points, compliance requirements, all those will become part of your product backlog. Okay, what are the different attributes for that? We'll make sure that you have the item description, what you really need, what is the priority order in those items are mentioned, and of course the estimate for that this will require 4 story points or 10 story points or whatever, and what is the value this particular requirement is giving. Okay, remember, it is the product owner's responsibility of the product backlog. So from product backlog, we will decompose into your sprint backlog. So sprint backlog is your more specific, I would say, what is required in that particular sprint. So let's say if product backlog has 100 requirements, and for this sprint I'm doing 10 requirements. So from 100, you will decompose into 10 requirements as a part of your sprint. So it's a prioritized set of requirement selected from the product backlog for the current sprint, correct? So it's a subset of product backlog, as I explained you. User stories are refined and detailed for implementation. So basically you are implementing that. So you will refine those user stories, and of course, product owner is someone who will own that backlog. So all the backlog has to come from product owner. Of course, he or she takes help of team members, Scrum Master and everyone, but he or she should be the one who will give them the prioritized list. Keep that in mind. Okay. Team will add an elaborate plan to achieve those selected. So now it is up to the team that how they want to do it. It's up to them. Product owner should not tell them how you are doing it. How part is coming from the team members only. Then we have definition of done and acceptance criteria is also added. So a lot of people get confused between these two items, that what is definition of done and what is acceptance criteria. Definition of done is that as a team member, how I think this is complete. This is as a team member, my definition. Acceptance criteria is, like for instance, my sushi restaurant. My chef says that the definition of done is that this particular sushi is cooked. That is the definition of done for them, and it tastes well. Varun, as a CEO, as a product owner, Varun's acceptance criteria is that it should also be served on the plate and it should be decorated. So for me, decoration plays a very important role. So let's say that decoration should also be part of it. So my acceptance criteria. So acceptance criteria comes from product owner or customer. Definition of done is something which is written by your team members. Okay. Of course, it will also have few things, which is the sprint goal. What are the user stories in that particular sprint? And finally, you will decompose those user stories into tasks. Keep that in mind. So there is a further decomposition from user story level to the tasks level, and that is part of your sprint backlog. The last artifact we have is the product increment. What is product increment? Let's see. Sum of all the backlog items that have been completed as per the definition of done, accepted and delivered so far. So basically, whatever you have completed in the backlog items, combine them together as per the definition of done and acceptance criteria. That is your product increment. What do I mean by that? Let's say I want to make a apartment, and I have completed my first floor of the apartment. So for me, and I have to make a 10-floor building apartment. So product increment would be that for this, once the second floor gets finished, that is my completion of the product increment. Once the third one gets finished, then again it's a completion of my product increment. So I'm incrementing that product by one floor at a time. That's your product increment. Okay. Last topic we have on your Scrum planning is your Scrum of Scrum. So sometimes you are working such a big project that it is like so related with each other that, you know, every team is doing their own work and stuff, and finally you all collaborate and, you know, connect the different dots together. You have a meeting known as Scrum of Scrum. Basically, you have a representative from a particular team, which is like your Scrum Master. So Scrum Master will come from team A, Scrum Master will come from team B, Scrum Master will come from team C, and all these 3-4 people will work together to make sure that the overall project is working fine. So that is your Scrum of Scrum. So this was your last topic in Scrum planning. So let's quickly do the revision. Make sure we discuss so many important topics over here. Make sure you know all the different types of Scrum roles, which is the product owner, Scrum Master, the team members, you know, who does what. That's very important. Then make sure you focus on the sprint review, the planning, the sprint review meetings, the sprint planning meeting, the retrospective meeting, what is the step-by-step process, and also what is the difference between the product and sprint backlog. So product backlog is at a high level, which has all the product requirements, and sprint backlog has the user story specifically for that particular sprint. Okay, so I hope you liked this video as well and you learned something new. Moving forward, we'll move to the third video of Plan and Implement Agile, which I think is on Agile analysis, and I'm pretty sure you will love it. Thank you. Hey guys, now we are back on the third video of your Plan and Implement Agile, which is your Agile analysis and design. Another very important concept, I would say. So far, as I told you, out of all the 3 chapters for Agile, the Plan and Implement Agile covers the most, but this one is also one of the very important topics. Like we will talk about the Agile analysis introduction. Same way we will also talk about the Agile design introduction. Then we will go into details about the user stories, what are the requirements hierarchy, how you come up with that backlog, which we have kind of discussed the sprint and the product backlog in the previous video, but we'll just do a quick check again. After that, I will talk about the story map and storyboard. A lot of people get confused between the story map and storyboard, so that is what we will discuss. And finally, we'll discuss the personas into that. Once this section is done, then we will move to the Agile design section. Now, the story map and storyboard, very, very important. So keep that in mind. For those 2 topics, you are listening carefully to me. Specifically, when I talk about the walking skeleton, the backbone and stuff, which I told you that I'll explain you later, this is the video where I will explain you. So let's dive right into it. So first of all, what is analysis? Detailed examination of structure or flow of elements. This is about Agile analysis. Basically, the detailed examination of the Agile structure. of the flow of the elements in Agile. That's what we will talk about in your Agile analysis. So what are the key features of Agile analysis? First of all, we have just in time, just good enough. I think I told you in the Agile planning introduction about that the just in time is it's a manufacturing concept where we bring down the inventory to zero. So same thing, collaborative, continuous, incremental, iterative. Difference between incremental and iterative, very important. The iterative life cycle and incremental life cycle in the types of life cycle video. Again, making sure that you understand the customer's need and it results in the overall vision of the product. So that's what we discuss. Now, this section is important from the tools perspective. User stories. I have already discussed about user story is how we write it, but I will just explain a little more detail about a user story. Then I will show you how the requirement hierarchy is, like we start from epic and we go up to the task level. So that is also something which I will talk about. Then of course, backlog, which should be quick because we have already discussed. Story map, storyboards and personas. Very, very, very important. So all of these topics are very, very important. And let's go right into each one of them. So first is the requirement hierarchy. What does this requirement hierarchy? If you see, it shows like, a tree-based structure, your WBS, right? So same kind of stuff over here as well. So what does this requirement hierarchy helps? First of all, like the way WBS help you to organize the work, because each work package is assigned to a particular team member. Same thing over here. This helps you to organize the work. Of course, you are decomposing those requirements which you have into further details, and you have to make sure that overall how these requirements are mapping to the overall vision. Ultimately, this will provide a proper structure and flexibility to the product owner, flexibility to your team to understand how you are actually doing the requirements. Now, at the very top level, you have the theme. From the theme, you are going down, which is epic. From epic, you define the features. From features, you define the user story, and the last level is your task. So this is your pyramid, and at the top level we have the theme, and at the bottommost level we have the tasks. So let's see, what is a theme? Theme is a group of related stories. The stories may not correspond to a single workflow and need not to be delivered together. Okay, so that's your theme. Let me explain you. Let me first read out epic for you again. Epic, group of related features or stories comprising a complete workflow for a user. Okay, generally seen as a big story. Feature, group of related stories delivered in a release. Story, smallest unit of work which provides meaning to the user. And finally, we have the task, which is also known as an activity which is decomposed from your story and which is finally marked as done. So which is the lowest level. So now let's see. So basically, if you see, the one which is on the top is like a group of the bottom one, right? So theme is at the top, like for instance, for my sushi restaurant, I want to make sure, so not a sushi restaurant, let's say, yes, that's actually a good example. So let's say for my sushi restaurant, I want to plan a launch party, and I decided that I will have a retro theme. What do I mean by retro theme? That this means, all my users, all my customers, my clients who will be coming and visiting my newly opened sushi restaurant, they will have to follow a retro theme, that they will be dressed as someone like a Hollywood actor or an actress and stuff. So I gave a theme as retro. Now that theme is actually a group of related stories. Like, someone will, dress it like a very popular, let's say Tom Hanks, So he is dressed as Tom Hanks, or someone else is, it's like, I don't know. I mean, what I'm trying to say is that you are dressed in one of the popular Hollywood actor. So that's a theme. Now, in order to do that, you have to do, decorations also. You have to make sure that in my restaurant, all those decorations are in that particular theme. So that is a theme, which is a group of related stories, but at the highest level. Now, from theme, you break it down into epic. What is an epic? Epic is a group of related features or stories comprising a complete workflow for a user. So the step-by-step process. So basically, from the time my end user, my customer enters my restaurant, and from there they are seated to a table, what is the step-by-step process? Like the moment they enter, I have a plan that, I will give them a garland or something, like I will welcome them with a welcome drink. But by the time they, somebody would take their coat if it's winters, and then by the time they reach their table, someone like, a server could help them to pull the chair for the lady and stuff like that. That is a group of related features, step-by-step process for that user. Okay. Now, from epic, you will decompose into different features, which is, what is features? Which is a group of related stories. What do I mean by that is, let's say, when the person is sitting on that table, we are not giving them just one feature, we are giving them multiple features. Like we are serving them appetizers, entree, dessert, right? In a step-by-step process. But at the same time, music is also playing, or, the drinks are also being served. So it's like multiple things are going on. But keep that in mind, you try to deliver, try is a wrong word. You deliver a particular feature in one particular release. Keep that in mind. When you do the release, you want to make sure that all those features are part of that release only. Okay. From features, you will go at a story level. Story is a step-by-step process, which is like, for instance, I will say, as an end user, I will eat appetizers first, so that, as a user, I will appetizers in a limited quantity so that I can eat my main course, entree and dessert lavishly or enjoyably, something like that. So that's a story, which is a step-by-step process of one thing. So basically, you're decomposing those features into multiple stories, and this is just one story, which I gave it so that, my client, my customer can enjoy that sushi or appetizer in that case. Keep one thing in mind, story is delivered in one particular sprint. If you cannot deliver it in one particular sprint, this means you have to decompose that story. So that is an important. Now, in order to deliver that story, I want to make sure I have to further decompose that story into task, which is the activities which are required to be done to make that mark my story as complete or basically done. Which is like task is like, you have to give the cutlery set to the customer, they need to have a spoon, or if someone is eating sushi not with spoon, then I have to give them chopsticks and stuff like that. So all those things are my very granular level, which is known as a task. So see how we started with the retro theme. From retro theme, we went into the epic, which was the group of related features, and from epic we moved into feature. From features we moved into the story level, which is at a particular sprint level, and finally we went into the tasks or activity level. So first, what is a user story? Small, simple and easily understandable goal that a user is trying to achieve. As I told you, a step-by-step process for the user, what user actually wants. So this is actually written from the perspective of the end user, which means that I will write, as a customer, of this sushi restaurant, I would like to have an appetizer, an entree and dessert so that I can enjoy my dinner. That is a user story written from the end user perspective. And what are the main constituents? First of all, you have to make sure that you write like who is the user. What is, like for instance, in my case, let's say Tom is a user who who came to my retro theme party for my restaurant opening. He is the user. What is Tom trying to do? Tom is trying to enjoy the sushi. And why Tom wants to enjoy the sushi? Because it's food. I believe everybody likes food. So again, that's your user. Now, what is the typical way you write it? It's as an end user, I would say, I want to this so that I can do. Like for instance, in my example, I will say as an end customer of the sushi restaurant, I want to try appetizers, entree and dessert so that I can enjoy a good lavish dinner. So that's a user story. Now a typical scenario I'll give you from a mobile banking user perspective. Let's say you want to view the last 10 transactions, a statement, a mini statement or a monthly statement. And why do you want to do that? You want to make sure that all your transactions are correct, there's no fraudulent charges and stuff. So how you will write that user story? It will say, as a mobile banking user, I want to view my last 10 transactions statement so that I can verify that transactions are correct. Now this is as a user story level. You will further decompose that user story into tasks. What could be the task? Last 10 transactions. That is my task. How will I see last 10 transactions? Like first of all, you really have to log into the mobile app, right? Is it through a Face ID or is it through a username password? How you are logging into that, right? So these are at a more granular level than a user story. So let's see. Let's move on. Then we talked about agile backlog, and I told you there are two types of backlog. We had the product backlog and we had the sprint or iteration backlog. Product backlog, it had all the requirements into this. Sprint backlog, iteration backlog, which is part of your Scrum, is the list of all the requirements or user stories which are required to be done in that particular sprint. So we also have a product backlog, release backlog or a iteration. Okay, so we also have a release backlog, which I didn't explain you in my previous video. Release backlog is, so product backlog is at a very high level, at a product level. Let's say I'm having 4 releases every year, which is on a quarterly basis. So product backlog will have 100 requirements. Then I have said that every quarter I am releasing 25 requirements. So every quarter my release backlog will have 25 requirements. Then in the sprint backlog, basically I have, let's say, those 25 decompose into different sprints. The number of sprints I will have. Okay. Agile backlog, it's a list of all the things which need, it's a collection of ordered user stories. Same thing. It doesn't contain non-value added items. Remember, in Agile, we don't like non-value added items. If something is not part of it, we just ignore it. It's a work in progress document, which means that if there are changes or if we have not completed something, it will again update your backlog. Okay, it will be derived from the roadmap. So remember, your product backlog is actually derived from the product roadmap. And who is the owner? It's actually your product owner who is responsible for all of these backlogs. Keep that in mind. Next tool we have is the story map. Story map, it's a collaborative practice that visually depicts how the solution is going to be iteratively developed. Basically, it's a way to show your product roadmap, and how you show that product roadmap is through a story map. Let me show you a story map. So this is a typical example of a story map. We have divided this story map into 3 sections, I would say. First, we have is your backbone. At the very top, if you see, that is a backbone. What does a backbone means? Which is the must-have capabilities for the product. That is the backlog. Like without this, you cannot even start. Like, we were talking about that mobile banking user, right? So for that mobile banking user, the must-have capability was an ability to log in to the mobile app. So if you cannot log in, you cannot even see your transactions, right? That is your backbone, which is the must-have. Then the second set we have is the walking skeleton. Walking skeleton is the smallest set of features to be built to give end-to-end functionality, which is, and this is at a one particular, like for instance, in that user story level, what was I doing? As a mobile banking user, I want to see my last 10 transactions so that I can check whether if there is any fraudulent transaction or not. So this is an end-to-end user story. In order to do that, what my walking skeleton will do is, okay, all the features is that, person should be able to log in, person should be able to select the dates of the transaction, person should be able to download that transaction in a PDF or an Excel format. So this is the end-to-end capability. That's known as your walking skeleton. And further below, we have all the user stories which are part of it. So it's a 3 level. First, the must-have, backbone. Second, walking skeleton, which is your end-to-end capability of one feature. And I mean not one feature, but there could be multiple features in order to implement that end-to-end. And finally, you have the user stories. Now, if you see at the bottom, we have divided this into 3 releases. So release 1, release 2, release 3, and we will always start from the topmost priority, which is the must-haves, then the walking skeleton, and finally the other user stories. Okay. Now, backbone, very important topic. A lot of people get confused between backbone. As I told you, it's the must-have. So backbone in the agile story map is the list of bare minimum activities that user has to perform to be able to use the product. As I told you, if you cannot log into the mobile app, you cannot do anything. So that example of logging in is your bare minimum. So backbone is your bare minimum. Okay, and typically these backbones are at a high level epics. So just below your theme, we have the epics. So it is at an epic level, and they will actually become the base for the minimum viable product. Like if you don't have it, you cannot even launch your mobile app. Okay, then as I told you, mobile banking user has to log in. Yes, perfect example I gave you. And at a minimum, these core set of steps a user must work through to accomplish their goal. Exactly. So this is something which will provide you the structure. These bare minimum will actually provide you the structure. Next we have is the walking skeleton. Walking skeleton is a very small implementation of the system that performs end-to-end function. Okay, so your end goal is end-to-end function. So whatever features which are required to give that end-to-end function, that is known as your walking skeleton. It is an executable and shippable if required, which means like end-to-end function, I'm saying that the user should log in, the user should see the dates for the transactions, the user should see the cost of those transactions, the user should be able to download that into PDF or Excel file. So this exactly is your walking skeleton. It need not use the final architecture, but it should link together to the main. Okay, so you have to remember that ultimately this is just one feature which I described it end to end. There could be 10,000 features in my mobile app. Like for example, I can use my mobile app to deposit a check. Not in all countries you can use a mobile app to deposit a check, but here in states we can use that. So that's another feature. That end to end should be walking skeleton for that, but overall when I combine, there could be 100 different features for that mobile app. Okay, and remember, the architecture and functionality can evolve in parallel. So this is something you can have different teams working on different features for that mobile app, and ultimately you will all collaborate together. Okay, minimum viable product, which is, it is the minimum functionality needed to demonstrate and test the product or service. MVPs are created to help the team to find features that customers are actually interested in. So first of all, minimum viable product. So minimum, we have the bare minimum. Viable is your just barely sufficient, and products is something like, your tangible, usable product. So that's your minimum viable product. That this is, I can ship it. Like for instance, my simulator for PMP exam. We started with the minimum viable product where we were giving them the capability just to watch videos. Then we started giving them questions. That's the second. So we actually use an incremental lifecycle approach. When questions were there, third, we gave them slides. Them means users like you. Then we came up with mentor package. Then we came up with boot camp. So we were incrementing it one by one. So minimum viable for me was create videos and launch it. That was my minimum viable product. So we did story map. Now a lot of people get confused between story map and your storyboard. So this is your next section, which is your storyboard, which is depicts the logical flow within a story, giving a step-by-step instruction. Okay, now storyboard is actually at one story, at a one user story level. Story map was at an overall level, like what all features, user stories. But now you are picking one user story and you are making a storyboard out of it. Like in this example, I showed that we wanted to motivate people to eat a lot of veggies, fruits and stuff like that. So we created a step-by-step storyboard for that, so that, and typically it's in a comic way, so that people like it, enjoy it. So that's how I'll say. So it's a step-by-step flow of a single story. It will break down the functionality of a story and display it. So we'll just pick one story and we'll break it down. Typically it is in a comic strip, so that it's like a visual interaction. You want to show that, how the end user is interacting, and you have to make sure that this story has a logical flow, like the steps in order how it is done. So that's your storyboard. So let's quickly see the difference. I've already told you the difference, but let's quickly see. Story map is something which is giving you the whole picture. Right? Story map, the backbone, the walking skeleton, the user stories. Storyboard is at a particular single story level. This is something, the story map is actually giving direction to the product at an overall level. Storyboard is actually giving you the functionality of that particular story. So it is at a particular story level. Okay. This makes sure, the story map makes sure that your overall development meets the business needs because it's at a product level, and this, the storyboard, makes sure that that story is flowing logically. There is a step-by-step logical flow for the same. Okay, last topic in your agile analysis is your personas. Persona is describe the type of user who would typically interact with the system. So, like in my sushi restaurant, what were the different types of users that will interact with my product, which is my sushi? In that case, I'll say, okay, there would be male, there would be females, there would be people between the, there would be kids, there would be people, from the age of 10 to 100. Right? So I will probably divide it, and each person, like somebody likes spicy food, somebody doesn't like spicy food, somebody wants gluten free, right? So there are different users I have. So persona is that I will pick one user and I will show how that particular user is interacting with my system. Okay, because everyone may have their different need. So there is a boy named Suchir, who is a professional swimmer. His age is 16. What he wants a health and fitness website. So what will be the persona? So Suchir, who is a professional swimmer, frequently upgrades himself on better ways to eat healthy, exercise and remain fit. He would like to get frequent recommendations about swimming related exercises and diet. So that's a typical example of a persona. What we did, we actually picked Suchir, who is a professional swimmer, and from his standpoint, we depicted that what his needs are. So in this case, his needs are that he want to get, recommendations about swimming related exercises and diet. So in order to achieve that, okay, I'll say, okay, these are the list of exercise, these are the list of diet, this is his weight. So diet should be according to his height and weight, things like that, right? So this is a persona. So we think it from an end user perspective. Okay, last section in your agile analysis and design is the agile design perspective. So let's quickly see what agile design is. What was agile analysis? The structured flow, right? In design, what we do is take an idea or a concept and transform into a drawing, model or a plan to create things that add value to people's life. So basically what we are doing is, before we give the final product to the customer, we will, take that idea, we'll take that concept, and probably I'll use a pen and paper and I'll start drawing it. Then from there, I'll probably start making it on, I'll ask my developer to help me start building it. Then from there, what will happen? So this is your design, and let's see what our design and what all things we use. So first is your agile wireframes. So what is agile wireframes? Simple block diagrams showing the placement of elements in UI. Product sketch meant to demonstrate intended layout and structure. So I'll give you a real life example on this. I was actually working with my sales and product director, sales and marketing director, and I asked him that, hey, what type of website page you want on the website, which shows all our products, and so he came up with a list of, he wrote a Word file, he wrote all those things he needs on that page and stuff. And what was my first reaction? I told him that, hey, you know what, I want you to create a wireframe out of it. What do I mean by that? I said, what you gave me is good. And exactly, but how do we want to see it? I want you to place that, use a pen and paper, draw it out and show me the picture of that so that I can help visualize it. That is known as your agile wireframe. So he created a pen and paper, he used it, and he showed it. So basically, what is an agile wireframe? Agile wireframe will show which elements will be displayed, what is the tentative layout, how will that user interact with the UI, what screen will come on clicking on buttons. So it's a step-by-step process. It's not functional. It is just showing that, okay, if you are on the first page, this is how it should look. When somebody clicks on that, this is how it will look. This is how it will look. So that's your agile wireframes, and for that, we have specific UI UX people who make these wireframes. Okay, a very plain, simple text is your agile wireframes. So from wireframes, we move to the prototype, which is a minimum sample or a model of a concept to see if the idea makes sense or not. Okay, so an early working model of a design to experiment with ideas and gather feedback. So wireframe was at a simple level, which was you're using a pen and paper, but now you are making an actual prototype like this robot. If you see how we are doing, so initially that robot had if you see his arm, so we started working on his arm. In the second, we completed his arm. In third, we created his leg. In fourth, we created his face. In fifth, we finally completed it. So that's a step-by-step prototype. After every prototype, the development team is showing to the customer is telling them, oh, I don't need this hand too big, I want it small, why don't you make this color, and blah blah blah. So that is your agile prototype. Okay, so if you see the difference between wireframes, mock-up and prototype, so wireframes was at the very basic level. Then you created a mock-up out of it. Mock-up is that wireframe is done by my sales and product director. Mock-up is done by my UI UX people who actually visualized what the sales and product director wanted, and he added it in the step-by-step. And prototype is, but still in the mock-up, the user, the things are not clickable, the functionality is not working. In prototype, everything is working, the colors have been added and stuff like that. So this is your difference between wireframe, mock-up and prototype. Keep that in mind. So wireframe is more of a sketch, mock-up is still a visual, and finally prototype is something which is interactive. So prototype is more like your working model. Like once you give the approval on that prototype, that will become the final product. So first, wireframe will have the structure, mock-up will have the style and colors, prototype is more about the flow. Keep that in mind. Purpose, wireframe is just to explore ideas and quick communication. Mock-up is to make sure you get that required feedback from the team, you get that buy-in. And finally, prototype is you will have the users testing, you will have the demonstration and all those things. From the pricing standpoint, wireframe is the cheapest, I would say. Mock-up will have a little more cost as compared to your wireframe, and finally prototype, since it would become like a product, that would be the most expensive. Okay, so this marks the completion of your agile design structure also. So we covered two things. We covered the agile analysis and then we covered the agile design. Now, what all things? First of all, user story, very, very important. As a user, I want this, so that, that's the format. Then also remember about the agile requirement hierarchy, where we started with theme, the retro theme example which I gave you. Then we went into the epics, features, user stories and tasks and stuff. Then make sure you understand the difference between storyboard and story map, the backbone and the walking skeleton. And finally, focus on the agile design, which is very easy, which covers three things: your wireframes, your mockups, and finally your prototypes. Okay, so this marks the completion of your agile analysis and design video. I hope you liked it. I'll see you in the next video where I will talk about the agile prioritization. Very important, not too big, but I'm pretty sure you would love that. Thank you. Hey guys, welcome back. So now we will talk about a very easy easy chapter per se in your plan and implement agile, which is the prioritization. So in this, I will show you like how we are prioritizing the different user stories which we have. There are different methods like Moscow, like 100-point method, Kano model, and the paired comparison analysis. So I'll be going over these 4 tools with you, 4 techniques, not tools per se, to make sure that we prioritize those user stories properly. So let's just dive into this. What is a prioritization? Techniques used to identify the relative importance of the work items / user stories so that they can be scheduled for development, bringing maximum value and minimizing overall risk to the project. So basically, what is our purpose to prioritize? In Agile, we don't start with whatever requirement like we have to do. Like let's say we have 100 requirements. And in predictive, it's like we have to do those 100 requirements. In Agile, we don't do it like that. In Agile, we'll first prioritize those requirements and then slowly and gradually start delivering those requirements so that they are, they keep on changing, right? So let's see. First, we have Moscow, we have Monopoly Money, we have 100-point, we have dot voting, which is the qualitative. On the quantitative side, we have Kano model, paired comparison analysis, relative weighted ranking, financial analysis techniques. So on this, from your exam,
these 4 are only important, which is Moscow, 100 point, and of course, Kano model and paired comparison analysis. So these 4 I would be discussing with you in detail. So first, Moscow, must have, should have, could have, won't have this time. So all the user stories which you have, you categorize those user stories into must have, should have, could have, won't have. And then it becomes easier for you. So let's see, let's first start with what are must have. Must have, as the name states, it's actually your most critical ones. Like, I cannot live without these requirements. Timely and qualitative delivery essential. Basically, the priority can be reduced if circumstances require. So, and we want to make sure that these requirements have to be done. It's like you cannot go live without these basic requirements. That's your must have. If you don't do that, then your project may be considered as a failure or non-viable solution or unsafe or even illegal, right? These are your must have requirements. Like for instance, you cannot give the test on my website if you're not logged in. So like logging in, giving the user a functionality of logging in is must have. So that's very, very important for us. Next is your should have. Should have is, this is important, but not important for this particular time box. Like for instance, I want to do it, but I may do it in my 4th iteration or 2nd release, things like that. So again, it is good to have, but not necessarily not mandatory. Like for instance, I would say, you can say that, I have given an option on the website to pause the test. Like if you don't have time to give the exam, for 2-30 minutes, you can actually pause it and come back to the website at a later stage. This is good to include, but it's not necessary. It was not right off the box, I have to give this requirement. Okay, excluding them can make life difficult for user. Okay, yes, some people, they really don't have time for 3 hours because of kids and work and all those things. So for them, it is a difficult life. So I want to make sure that, I give them the capability. Non-present doesn't make the project a failure or a non-viable solution. The solution still exists. Yes, what if I was not giving you the capability of pausing the test? You would still have come to my website and still given. So the solution will still exist in this. It's not a failure per se. Okay. Then we have could have, which is good to have, wish list or desires to be included if time and resource constraints are not there. First one to be dropped off if the project faces time resource constraint. And finally, impact of exclusion is not much. Okay, could have is more like good to have, which means that giving more and more features, but you may not, like for instance, if you go on my website right now, on the test we are giving the breakdown through knowledge areas, through your process groups, through your different domains, and I think mathematics and all those things also we take into consideration. So really, I don't have to even talk about all the different things, right? But still, these are good to have. I'm pretty sure that if you know that, okay, you're not scoring good in, let's say, risk management, then you know that you have to work on risk management, right? That's your could have. Won't have. Okay, the last in the list is won't have, which is we will not do this. These are like the least critical one, and we won't have any return on this. In future we can include it, or we can just completely drop this out from the project. This has no impact of exclusion. Like you will not even come to know, or you will not even realize that. That is your won't have. Okay, so what is the won't have on my website which I really didn't want? So somebody came to me and he said that I want to translate your simulator, your test questions, your videos into French, because we want to target the French market. Okay, for me they were least critical because I am under the assumption that my students from France, who use the French language, they can understand English also, so they can come back to me and they can still understand. So for right now, and they are actually giving the exam in English only, so there is no actual impact of exclusion for that. So that's your won't have. So in future, if time permits, I may add it. Okay, next one in the list is your 100-point method. Very simple, straightforward. Every stakeholder is actually given 100 points. I'll give you, let's say, 5, 10, 20, 30, 10, so in total, I'll give you 100 points. Now, whenever we talk about a user story, if let's say I'm the Scrum Master, I would say that, okay, what do you think about user story 1? If you think that it's of 10 points or 20 points or 30 points. So in this way, you only have 100 points and you have to distribute those 100 points in X requirements, X user story. If you want, you can actually give 100 points to just one single item if you think that's like the utmost importance. So that is 100-point method, where the stakeholder assigns those 100 points to the user stories. Okay, one of the most popular prioritization technique is your Kano model. So Kano model is actually a development theory which helps to identify the feature set which will improve customer satisfaction and hence should be included in the next delivery. So Kano model, it came from Professor Kano, and he divided. So he actually created a graph. He plotted he actually had 5 categories, and based upon those 5 categories, he created an x-axis and a y-axis. X-axis represented the implementation and y-axis implemented the satisfaction. So what does that mean? So if you are implementing it, is it causing satisfaction or is it causing dissatisfaction? So basically, those 5 categories which Professor Kano made it was basic, performance, exciters, indifferent and reverse. Once again, a very important topic. So in the exam, the type of questions you will get is, they'll give you a scenario and they will say that in which category will this fall? Will this be exciter or indifferent or reverse or basic or performance? So you have to clearly understand the difference between all of these. Okay, let's see. First, we have the basic. So just like your Moscow, we had must have, right? Basic is your must have, which is like taken for granted kind of user stories, which is requirements that customer expects the product to have. Okay, it's like the price of entry into the market. No additional revenue on including them, but product incomplete without them. Like there are so many companies which only sell PMP videos. There are so many companies which only sell PMP test questions. Now, for us, but we have the complete suite. We have everything. Now, in order to even go into this market, the basic must have we wanted to have was that we should have the chapter questions. For us, it was the basic necessity. Now, like if we don't even have those chapter questions, we can't even sell the test package. That's how the scenario is. So if you come on my website and if you see that, hey, you know what, these guys are not giving chapter questions, you will get dissatisfied by that. Okay. But if you have it, you'll say that, hey, you know what, they are doing the same thing what others are doing. That is your basic must have. Okay. Next is your performance. Performance is, also known as one-dimensional nillier. What does that mean is, first of all, you're satisfied when this is fulfilled, and if it is not fulfilled, you are dissatisfied. So customer is very much interested in these features and is willing to pay additional price to have them. The more such features, the better it is. Like most of the people who come on my website, they really love my question explanation videos. The way I attempt a question, I look into the question and how I use my elimination technique in order to come up with that is like my differentiator. So for me, that is performance. Now people get satisfied when they see that performance, and they get dissatisfied if they don't see anything like that. So, and honestly, because of those question explanation videos, people come in and pay extra for those. They really want to make sure that they get that where they're not getting from anyone else. Okay, that's your performance. Next is your exciters, which is also known as attractive delighters, which is unexpected, pleasant surprises and bring the wow factor, differentiators. Innovative offerings of the product service delight when the customer present, no dissatisfaction if not present. Over time, they turn into basic attributes. Basically, exciters are something which you didn't expect, but you got that. That is your exciter. You had no clue about it, but you got it. And like for instance, and on my website, if you submit a paper or a test, you will find the Timebox page number. Now, a lot of people actually say that, hey, Varun, a lot of your competitors don't give the exact Timebox page number, but you are giving the exact Timebox page number. So that feature is like an exciter. But you will not even realize, if it is not present for now. But over time, once you get so used to reading that Timebox page number mentioned in that particular question, these will actually turn into the basic attributes. So that's your exciters. Then last we have the indifferent and reverse. Indifference is they are present, but presence or absence doesn't actually matter. You really don't care about those. Like, customer don't care about these. This is rare but do happen. Neutral, both at presence and absence. Like for instance, the pause functionality I was talking about. You really don't care about it. You want to make sure you go on the website, you see it and you use it and go out. But if you don't have that pause feature, I'm still pretty sure that you will still go ahead and buy those things. That's indifferent, which doesn't make any difference. Lastly, we have reverse, which is added functionality leading to dissatisfaction, which is these refer to a high degree of achievement causing dissatisfaction, too many extra features. And I'll give you a real life example. There is an app known as Waze. It's like your Google Map or Apple app. And somebody told me that, why don't you download this app named Waze? And it's very nice. It shows you all those cool features and all those things. So I was very happy about it. I downloaded it, but it was just giving me too much information. I got so mad at that, I actually uninstalled that app. So that was reverse. What too many features that app was giving me was like, if somebody is even has a car breakdown, somebody, I have no clue about it, and he or she has, is on the sidewalk, it is showing me that feature also. I mean, why do I care that, Mr. X or Miss X car has broken down on the highway? I don't care, right? Because of those too many features, I actually uninstalled the app. That was reverse. Okay, so let's do a quick summary. First, basic. If they are present, neutral, neither happy nor sad. Absence will definitely lead to dissatisfaction. Performance, if they are present, it will lead to satisfaction, and absence will definitely lead to dissatisfaction. Exciters, people will be so delighted to have those exciters. And similarly, for their absence, it will be neutral. They don't care. Indifferent, presence, neutral, absence also neutral. Finally, reverse. If they are there, you will get dissatisfied. And if they are absent, you will actually get satisfied. That is the reason that I'm giving you all the features on my website, on my app to use this product. But I don't think so I can add any more feature into this. So that's perfect, right? So I have no reverse into that. Okay, last but not the least prioritization technique, we have the paired comparison analysis. So what is this paired comparison analysis? Let's say I want to compare between A, B, and C. 3 user stories. 1 stands for high priority, 0 stands for low priority. So first I will do a comparison of A to A. So first, if you compare A and this A, there is nothing. But once you compare A and B, Since A is higher priority, you will add you will add 1. When you do A and C, A is also a higher priority than C, you will add 0.1 here. Now when you compare B with A, you know that B is of lower priority, so you will add 0. B and B is nothing, you will add 0, and between B and C, B is higher priority, so you will give 1 to B here. Then when you do C and A, you know A is higher priority than C, so 0. B is higher priority than C, so 0. So basically you will have, if I sum it out, I have A 2, B 1 and C 0. So clearly it looks like my A is my top priority, B is my second priority, and C is my third priority. So this is known as your paired comparison analysis. Okay, so this marks the completion of our prioritization video. Very small but very important, lot of interesting facts, and I would really recommend that if you are into agile world and if you're not using these techniques, start using it. It will make your life much easier. But what is important? Moscow, very, very important. Dot voting, I gave you 100 points, right? So remember that 100 points are given or dots are given actually. So in dot voting, what you do is they give you, let's say 100 dots, and you have to apply those 100 dots in front of a particular user story. So 100 points or a dot voting, kind of same thing. Then Kano model, very, very important, where they divided into different stages. That's very important. Make sure you understand Kano model. And finally, the last prioritization technique was your paired comparison analysis, which was another important one. Okay, so I hope you like this video. In next section, I would be talking about the last video of this chapter, which is agile estimation. A very interesting one, and I'm sure you would love it. Thank you. Hey guys, welcome back. So now we will talk about the last video of your plan and implement chapter, which is agile estimations. So right now, so far what we did, we talked about the agile planning, we talked about Scrum planning, then we did the analysis, design then we also talked about the prioritization, and now we will talk about the estimation. How do you estimate the user stories, or whatever requirements you have in your backlog? Let's see what all things we will have. First of all, I'll give you the introduction to agile estimation. Then I will show you the difference between the traditional, which is your predictive, and agile estimation. Finally, I'll show you your sizing units on what's what are the, is it days, hours, or what, what kind of sizing units you give, what is relative sizing, story points, and then relative sizing techniques we have, and finally we'll talk about the consensus. So all these things we would be covering in your estimation chapter. So first of all, estimation. If somebody asks you how much this work will take, how much time will this you will probably say that, hey, I think this will take 5 days, this will take 2 days. But in this agile estimation, we don't give specific units as such, like 2 days, 5 days and stuff. So first of all, what is estimation? Approximate measure of a size. So like in this case, I'll show you that, oh, you know what, there are 400 what is this? This is like M&M. So I'll say 400 M&M in a jar. Okay, if I divide it into, I can say this is 1/3, or is it half, and this one is like 100. So what I'm trying to say is that if I compare A, B and C, I can say that, okay, this is 1 unit, this is twice or thrice the unit, and finally this one is 4 times 1 unit. So that is your estimation, which is approximate measure of size. We don't go into very specific, we just give an approximation. Agile to determine the approximate effort needed to carry out a work item. Once again, it is an approximate effort. But in your traditional, we never used to say approximate. You would not say it will take 4 to 6 days. You will probably be very specific and say that this will be completed on XYZ date. That's your predictive. In your Agile, so some of the estimations we have, like first of all, it is initial high level. You always start with a high level and you'll say that, oh, this will take X, Y, whatever. Then you progressively elaborate that. Okay, as more and more information becomes clear, you go in and start refining it. Just in time, you don't do it for your entire project. You only do it at the right time whenever it is required and just good enough. You don't give extra, you don't do less. Incremental and iterative, always remember, incremental, you are adding on top of it. Iterative, you are making the one perfect. So agile estimations are incremental also, and agile estimations are iterative also. Of course, it's a collaborative approach. It's not done by just one person. It's more of a team effort. And finally, it is continuous. Continuously you have to improve on that. So what all things do we estimate in Agile? First, we estimate the product backlog. So since it's the product backlog and we want to make sure that they are done it at a high level, we define the timelines and prioritization. So all those things are taken care, we estimate that. Okay. Now at a sprint and iteration backlog, which is at a more granular level, some more information is into this. You do the agile estimations on that also. You want to make sure that you select the right items, right, for a particular sprint. If you don't know about those, if you don't know the estimation, how will you select? Sometimes your prioritization depends upon the estimation. Like this will take 4 units and this will take 2 units. But the 4 units is, let's say, more higher priority. But sometimes you may change the priority just because the other one can be delivered quicker. Right? So the prioritization and estimation goes hand in hand. Now the traditional versus agile. So in traditional versus agile, as I told you, in traditional it's very specific absolute number of hours. In agile it is relative sizing, which is you will say that, oh, you know what, this is 4 units. In traditional you will say this is 4 hours. Okay. When we do it in traditional, you do the estimation upfront. But in agile, it is just in time and just good enough. So you do that just before, like first of all, of course, you will do it at a high level, which is you're at a product backlog level. You can do it at a release level also. But in reality, you actually do it at an iteration level, which makes more sense. So just before your sprint start, if you're using a Scrum, you will do that. Okay. Delivery date. In traditional approach, you will have a very specific delivery date and go live. In agile, you will give a rough order. Basically, you will give a ballpark estimate, and then as you are closer to your date, then you will probably provide the specific one. Okay, what are the basis of your traditional? It is your SME does the estimation for WBS, or it is more on the task based. But in this agile, your estimations are typically feature based. You are doing it on the stories, user stories. Okay, so your entire entire feature will actually be first estimated at a high level, and then during the iteration, when you have decomposed that feature into different user stories, that is when you will be little more specific about it. What is the value? Value for your traditional is actually a single point estimates, and in agile it's not just a single point estimate, it is actually more like in some kind of range which you give. Okay, let's see what are the different tools and techniques. First we have for the sizing units. Okay, we have ideal time, real time, story points. We'll talk about those things. Relative sizing is another, story points, and the relative sizing techniques, we have the affinity estimation, t-shirt sizing, you have the planning poker, you have the wideband Delphi. All those are actually your relative sizing techniques. At the consensus side, we have the fist of 5, Roman voting, polling, and dot voting. Okay, so I may not have explain you all of these. Some are important, some are not that important from your exam perspective. So I'll tell you exactly which ones are very, very important when I cover those topic. So first we have the sizing units. So sizing units is decomposed into 3 sections, which is ideal time, real time, and your story based. So what is your ideal time? First of all, time needed to complete a task. No breaks, no diversions, no non-value added work. What do I mean by that? Like I'm recording this video right now. For me, my ideal time to complete this video is 10 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever. That's my ideal time, which means I didn't take any break. It's in one single shot. I'm explaining you this topic. That is known as your ideal time. The ideal time it should take to complete something. Okay? Real time. Real time is your actual time needed to complete a task. What do I mean by that? Which means, in this case, this is not a good example that I recorded this in one single shot for 30-40 minutes, whatever. But in reality, you don't do that. You're watching a movie, right? What happens in that? They take one shot, then they go back, they take another shot, and then they club it and join it together. So that is your real time, which means they consider your distractions, diversions, any non-value added work is also included in that. So real time includes the time from start till finish, like the complete time. So basically, your ideal time can be converted to real time by experienced team. Okay, so my ideal time is that this should take 30 minutes. My ideal time, but my real time is that I have distractions and all those things. This is not just taking 30 minutes, it may take 40 minutes for that. So that's your real time. Then we have relative sizing. Relative sizing is that you compare 2 items. Now, like for instance, you are saying that this item is 2 times greater than this item, or this item is 3 times greater than this item, or this item is 1/4 of this item. So this is your relative sizing. In Agile, you use relative sizing, that this is 1x, 2x, 3x, 4x. That makes your life a little bit easier. Okay. Story points, it's actually, story points is actually based on your concept of relative sizing only. Basically same thing. If you see, the 2 figures of Earth, one Earth is half as the other one, or the other one is twice as big. So that's your story point. And basically, story point is your relative estimation only. What are the different relative sizing techniques? We use affinity estimation, we use t-shirt sizing, we use planning poker, and we use wideband Delphi. Okay, very important. You may get questions in your exam on this topic. They'll give you a scenario and they will ask, what technique, what relative size techniques, the project manager is doing. Things like that. So first is your affinity estimation. So what is your affinity estimation? A collaborative technique where like size items are grouped together. So basically, if you see this, you have different samples: yellow, blue, red, green. In this, what you will do is you will collaborate all of those into one. That is your affinity estimation. Now you are grouping all the ones which are same, based on the numerical values, and of course it is relative, as I said, which means it is rough estimate. It's not necessarily that very specific, it is rough estimate. So you club all the ones together. So affinity estimation is collaboration technique where you are collaborating like size items together. Okay. Now, let's see the end-to-end process of this. First of all, what we will do is we'll write the user story on sticky notes. Then first item is read to the team and posted on the wall. So let's say it's a Scrum Master who is doing that. Scrum Master will read the first user story and will paste it on the wall. Then team will think about the potential size, based upon that, and they will say that, oh, you know what, I think this is level 1. or level 2, whatever, level 1. The second story, then they will read the second story. The second story, based upon that, they will decide whether the second story is twice as big or half as size or whatever. And based upon that, if it is, let's say, smaller, then they will post it on the left side of first story. If it is bigger, then they will paste it on the right side of it. So right side bigger, left side smaller. Similarly, they will now do the third story. Now they will read it. Same way, they'll complete the same items. Is it smaller than second or bigger than second? And then they will, keep on doing that. Now, control then shifted to the team for remaining items as a team or individual. So basically what they are doing is, what is the good part about this is that, the team will come to the consensus in the first go. And grouping is very much faster because, it's easier. So, of course, you may have to do it multiple iterations to reach consensus. You may talk about all those items, but still, it's a good process of doing it. Next, we have the t-shirt sizing, and this is a very common term actually used in real world, I would say, which is you place a t-shirt size on your user story. So you will say that this one is extra small, this one is small, this one is large, this one is XL. So this is what you do in t-shirt sizing. Let's see the process. Relative sizing technique to quickly group a large number of scenarios. Of course, it is an open collaborative discussion. What you will do is, if let's say you think it is large, the other person thinks it's an XL, you will have a discussion about it. And if there is a deadlock situation, of course, you will use voting, and of course, you will time box that. You have to take a decision in 1 minute, 5 minutes, or whatever. Okay. So you use this if the scope and scope is not very concrete. Then you actually prefer the t-shirt sizing. Okay, another one which is very popular is your planning poker. Okay, I am a big fan of poker. I just love poker. But we actually use this planning poker in the estimation forum agile also. What do we do? The most popular planning poker technique is your Fibonacci series. What you do it is, in this, each member selects an estimation for a story from a deck of cards and discusses it till everybody agrees to it. First of all, in planning poker, as I told you, the product owner will take the responsibility of this, and he or she is the facilitator, and each team member will have your Fibonacci series, which is these cards, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. You can get it from Amazon or eBay or whatever. You can easily find it. Now, each of these have a certain criteria. Like for instance, you will say that, I'm giving 3 points to this, I'm giving 5 points to this. And if the team disagrees, you will definitely have voting or some kind of consensus agreement on this. This is known as planning poker. Okay, once again, you really don't need to go into that detail, that what does that T size T is, what is question mark is self-explanatory, but you don't have to go into this much detail. But just remember, you have the deck of cards and you do that. Okay, let's just do a quick revision of the process. First, each member will have one set of cards with them. The product owner will read, the first item, and they will discuss about it. After that, each team member will select a card with their estimate for the story. Now, when all are ready, everyone showed their estimate at the same time. So everyone will say that, I said 3, I said 5, I said 8. If the estimates vary, which means lowest and highest value, if what they will do, they will the person who has the lowest and the person which has the highest, they will start talking about it, and of course everyone can chime in and they can talk about it. You will have a time box discussion unless they all agree to it. Okay, and if they don't, you will have some kind of voting process and you will probably pick that. Okay, next we have the consensus. How we can make sure that the entire team is agreeing to that. Now, in order to come up with consensus, there are a couple of ways in order to. First, and the most popular one we have is the fist of 5. So what is fist of 5? Now, you will probably read out a requirement, okay, and you think that you have no clue about it, you'll show a fist. If you show 1, this means you really need some help and there has to be some discussion. 2, this means you need some more, I typically ask my students also when I explain this topic, fist of 5, which is who all did not understand. So they will say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What does all this mean? 0 means I don't understand. 1 means I need help. I'm confused. 2, I understand, but I want you to give me some practice questions and examples and stuff. 3, I understand it pretty well. I'm very good. 4, I can, I mostly understand. I can actually show it to you how this is done. And 5, I completely understand and I can actually teach. So that's your 5. So 5 stands for full agreement. Fist stands for total disagreement. Keep that in mind. Okay, another technique we have is the Roman voting. So what happens in Roman voting is thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs horizontal. So thumbs up means you agree. Thumbs down means you don't agree. Thumb sideways means that you don't have any strong opinion. So you do that for your user stories and you try to agree. This is a consensus approach. Okay. Then the most common one is your polling, which is team member talk and share opinions with each other. If they agree, everyone is agreed, they will probably move to the next topic. If there is some kind of different opinions, then facilitator will actually facilitate the discussion. They will do, they will say, okay, who all agree to this? Everyone will raise their hand. Who all do not agree to this? They can raise their hand. So things like that, that's your polling, one of a very common technique. Now, another one, which is your dot voting. So what happens in dot voting is, first of all, this is something which is actually, for very small number of user stories, that is when you prefer the dot voting. What you do is, each of the team members will be given some dots. They will have some couple of dots with them. Then, whatever user story you are reading, the end user will place a dot on that. Like more the dots, the more the size. Less the dot, less the size. So that is known as your dot voting. Okay, so this marks the completion of your last topic, which was on agile prioritization. Another important one, very interesting, lot of questions, but very easy also, right? So let's see what are important. First of all, make sure you understand the difference between traditional and agile estimation. Then you talk about your ideal and real time. Keep that in mind, where I was talking about the ideal time and the real time, 30 minutes to do this and 10 minutes for distraction, stuff like that. Then remember about the relative sizing techniques which we use, the affinity estimation and all. And finally, you should focus on your consensus technique also, your dot voting and all those things that are important too. So this marks the completion of your second chapter, which is plan and implement agile. So what do I expect from you? Now, I want you to go to my slides and just quickly go through those slides once again. Once you go through those slides, once you have done the proper revision, then go on the website, solve these questions, solve these 25 questions, review your mistakes, how you did it, and then send me an email stating that Varun, I scored 60 or 80 or 90, and then I will guide you with the next one. See you in chapter number 3, which is monitoring in agile. Hello everyone, welcome back to a brand new chapter in Agile, which is about Agile monitoring. So initially, I started with introduction to Agile. Gave you a little bit of introduction about how Agile and what the different types of life cycles are. From there, I moved towards plan and implement Agile. How we plan in Agile and how we implement in Agile. However, you have to keep one more thing in mind, that the third most important constituent of Agile is the monitoring piece. So in this particular chapter, we will discuss all about Agile monitoring. This particular video, I will talk about the Agile monitoring introduction. That's where I will start with. And from there, I will talk about the feedback loops. How in Agile, the feedback loops are, inbuilt. Basically, we'll talk about daily stand-up, Agile reviews, retrospective, how we are constantly doing monitoring using these techniques. After that, we will talk about the frequent verification and validation, and we will end up this particular video with the most important topic, which is your burn up and burn down chart. Similarly, on the same lines, Kanban and your Scrum task board. Two very important topics from where I would say you would get the most number of questions. So let's go right into it. Agile monitoring. Agile monitoring involves two things. First, it's your feedback loops, and second, monitoring the project progress and performance. From the feedback loop standpoint, let's give a little bit of introduction about it. Monitoring in Agile is inbuilt into the system. It is conducted daily in every iteration, release and project. So what do I mean by that? In Agile, you don't specifically do, like for instance, in your predictive, you have your test cases, you have monitoring and control process group. What do? Once you create a deliverable, you immediately test it, right? But in Agile, it is not a standard, a separate entity, but this is something which is inbuilt into the system. Like you are doing your daily stand-ups. You're talking about, what are the impediments, issues the team is or the team member is facing. That's kind of monitoring, right? It's all about measurements with the emphasis on finding areas where we should take action to improve. And based upon your sprint reviews, based upon, the releases, retrospective, all those are actually part of your Agile monitoring. Okay. In waterfall, monitoring is to ensure that there is no deviation from the plan. In Agile, it's more about quality control, improvements, and the process inspection. So Agile is not about that you have deviated from the plan. It's on the sprint and it's on the iteration basis, right? It's more about that you are doing the right thing. You are making sure that you are making constant improvement as per your retrospective. And of course, the process inspection as well. Some of the tools which you use in Agile, it's your daily stand-ups, as I told you, variance, I would say retrospective, another important one, your burn down chart, your CFDs, the cumulative frequency diagram, and frequent verification and validation. So that's another one. So we'll discuss all of these in detail in this particular video. So first, feedback in Agile. Feedback is basically, I would say that, it's like you get constant feedback from your customers, from your product owners. Like everyone is giving you constant feedback in that 2-week sprint cycle. That is the whole benefit of Agile. Why? Customer can see the product immediately. He or she can give you the feedback right away. So that's a kind of monitoring, right? Okay, what are the tools and techniques which we use for Agile monitoring? Of course, as I told you, the regular monitoring, we have your daily stand-up, your sprint reviews, retrospective, your frequent verification and validation. However, for your overall project perspective, you have your burn up and burn down chart, and you have your Kanban board. So I would say, if out of all of these, if I have to pick one topic which is very, very important, is your burn up, burn down chart and your Kanban board. So first, daily stand-up. I have already discussed this with you multiple times. What do you do? 15 minutes. It's not a status meeting. Keep that in mind. You answer 3 questions: what you did yesterday, what you are doing today, and what you will be doing. And what are the obstacles or issues or impediments there is, right? So that impediments, that obstacles, that is something which which is one way of monitoring your project basically. So that's your agile monitoring. And if there is any particular topic which cannot be covered in those 15 minutes, that will become your parking lot item. Okay, let's see what are the different types of reviews. You do the design review, you do the code review, progress review, quality review, and the increment review. Let's go into each one of them in detail. What are these? First, we have the design review. What is design review? To detect errors in the design and hence enable to take actions from the learning. So design review is at the overall design structure. My sushi restaurant, which I made, which I constructed with the help of my team, design review would be making sure that all the design aspect of my restaurants is perfect. Okay, and if there are any errors in the design, I want to give that authentic, Japanese look, because sushi is a Japanese cuisine. So from there, right? So that is a design review. Code review. Code review is actually two types. First is to make sure that you are finding issues in code. If you don't understand what code is actually a term from your IT world, but let's say your website, even if you are into some other, like let's say you are from construction and you have no clue about, what is code or how code is written. Just imagine one thing. For your construction, wherever you are doing, the company you are working, they would definitely have a website. Who built that website? What is the code they use? So code is like a programming language which is used to give you the deliverable, which is your construction website in this case, right? So code review is of two aspects. First is to find the issues, and second, that you are using and following the proper standards. Then you have the quality review. What is quality review? Quality review is to make sure that whatever is expected out of you from the deliverable, you are doing it. Okay, and this is something which is taken care by frequent verification and validation, which I will definitely explain you in detail. Last, we have the progress review, which is how you at an overall project level you do things like burn up, burn down chart and CFDs. Remember, burn up and burn down chart is very, very important, and I will talk to you in detail about those. After that, we have your increment review. Now increment review was a kind of important one, so that's why I put a complete slide as such. So what is an increment review? Increment review is, this is an event which is actually like your sprint review meeting. Sprint review meeting. Now what will happen, in sprint review meeting, you will make sure that whatever was expected out of you, did you complete it or not? And if it is yes, the product owner, the customer will sign off and say that yes, that's done. That is your sprint review. Same is the increment review, where the logic is whatever things which was expected out of you, did you do that or not? Did all those user stories in combination were towards your product or not? So that's your increment review. Now, what is the purpose of increment review? What is that sprint review? If you remember, this is something which makes sure that it's a demo is given. So they will show you the showcase the work done. Of course, the basic purpose is to obtain feedback. If you're obtaining feedback, this means you are doing agile monitoring, right? And as I told you, sprint review is twofolds, or increment review. It's twofold. What do? First half, you talk about how the current spring went, whatever was expected, you will give the demo to the customer. The second fold is what you will take up next. So that is also that's also kind of monitoring you are doing, right? Basically, the responsibility is of the product owner, and the purpose is to get as early feedback from the customer. Yes. So why do you want early feedback? So that if there are any changes, you make those changes in the beginning, and later phase you are not worried about those. It would be more expensive. How does this review process starts? First, the PO will invite all the team members, the Scrum team and all those things. PO will explain these are the things which are done, these are the things which are not done. Team will give the demo, on the done items. Then stakeholders or PO will accept whether those items have been completed or not. Team will talk about the things which went well, any obstacles they found, and finally, the product owner will share the product backlog. If there were things which were not completed in that sprint review, they'll go into the product backlog. Remember, sprint review is of two things. First, the things which you did in this particular sprint, and the second half would be for the next user stories which are required to be done. Okay, frequent verification and validation. As I told you, there are three key points into this: frequent verification, frequent validation, and finally the hardening iteration also. If you remember, I explained to you about iteration 0 and your hardening iteration. Now, early and frequent testing, both internal and external team with the aim to reduce the cost of the quality. So basically, as I explained to you, the basic purpose is cost of quality. You want to make sure that the early you found issues, early you would resolve it. The early you will resolve it, it's cheap for you, right? Now, frequent verification and validation. Build great products and services. The product or service built is what customers were looking for. Building the right thing, which is validation. First time right is your verification. Due to nature of the software projects, the chance of miscommunication and misunderstanding is very, very high. So what do I mean by that is, so when you do frequent verification and validation, if you, there's a very popular image, which is you started, that you wanted a swing. And from the swing, the developer thought that this is how the business analyst thought, or product owner thought that this is how the swing should be built. This is how the salesman sold it. This is how, the budget was there. And this is what customer was expecting. And ultimately, when we saw that, it came out that, hey, you know what? The customer really wanted this. This is a very common issue in a waterfall model, and this type of issue was actually resolved in Agile and using frequent verification and validation. So what you do in validation, you are making sure you're building the right thing. When you take approvals from customer in every sprint, that's your validation, and it's your job as your team member to make sure that you are making it first time right. That's verification. You're doing the definition of done, right? Definition of done comes from the team members. So verification is something, as I told you, is something internal. The team members will do that. The purpose is to make sure that they are making the product or service as per the requirements, as per the required specs, and they have to make sure that it meets the customer requirements. Validation, on the other end, is typically from this product owner or from the customer standpoint, which is basically they will give the approval whether the work which you and the team member have done is right or not, and their basic purpose is to build the correct solution. And that correct solution is something which should match the customer expectations also, like your acceptance criteria. That is something which is coming from your customer. So frequent validation is also used as a agile monitoring topic. Sprint retrospective, you use retrospective. What is sprint retrospective? This is a meeting which is conducted after the end of sprint. Basically, I think it's a 3 hour in 1 month. That's how typically it is. And if it's a 2-week sprint cycle, you typically do 1.5, and it is done after your sprint review meeting. And the basic purpose of retrospective is like lessons learned. You make sure how the things went, what are there any areas of improvement and things like that. And as an output of this, if you think you have to add a new user story to monitor this, to improve the quality, you will add it to the backlog. Okay, we have already discussed the sprint retrospective process step by step. Done after sprint reviews. Facilitator is the Scrum Master. 3 hours, 1 month. It's on the self inspection and adaptation, and finally improvement is for the next sprint. That's what your basic goal is, right? Okay, now let's talk about the 3 most important, not 3, basically I would say the 4 most important. It's the burn up, Burn down chart, very, very important. And then you have the Kanban board or the task board, or you also have the Scrum task board also. So there are these 3-4 tools which are very, very important. Let's start. Burn up chart. Once again, very, very, very important. Burn up chart. Now, graphically depicts the work finished versus the remaining story points. What does that mean? So if you see, in this particular diagram, the blue line will represent the scope which is expected out of you, and the red line will actually show you the progress. How you are making the progress against that work. So blue line is your total work and red line is your progress about it. Now, if you see closely this burn up chart, what you are doing is, let's say initially in iteration 0 when you started, you wanted to complete 100 story points worth of work. In iteration 1, you completed X. In iteration 2, you completed 18. In iteration 3, you completed 31. So it just shows you the progress, that how you are working towards your end goal. Now, keep one thing in mind. If you see your iteration number 5, there is a slight bump in the total. What does that mean? It shows that there were changes in your story points, which means that there were new additions to your requirement. So from 100, you came to 130 story points worth of work, and the team is constantly working towards that. So that is your burn up chart. Now, this is a very good example where I wanted to show you that whether your project is behind schedule or ahead of schedule, and this is what you have to think through it, because in exam they may ask you a question where they will give you a graph like this, and they will ask you select a point on the graph where you think it is behind schedule, or from where it started to be behind schedule. Or they may say select a point where you think the project actually went ahead of schedule. So this is a very important topic. Or they'll give you a point and they will say that on 7/1/2031 whether the project was ahead of schedule or behind schedule. So this is, you have to think carefully about this. Now, if you see, blue line represents your completed work. Okay, red line is your total original scope, and green line is your ideal scope. Now let's first take into consideration your 6/1/2031. So where you are on 6/1/2031. So if you see over there, you completed around close to 8 story points, right? If I guessed it, your ideal story point was close to 12 or 13. So let's first take into consideration 6/1/2031. Okay, so this point is close to, I would say over here, which is 8. So on 6/1/2031, you completed 8 story points. 8 story points. Now, your ideal story points was somewhere here, which is your 12 is your ideal story points. Okay. Now, if you have to calculate, are you behind schedule or are you ahead of schedule? So it clearly shows that you completed 8 story point, where in reality you should have completed 12 story points. So this means at this point you are behind schedule. Similarly, if I say 7/31, in 7/31 you actually completed 20 story points. 20 story points. However, your ideal story point should be close to 15 story point. So over here it shows that you were ahead of schedule. So this is your burn up chart. An important topic is your burn up chart. Many questions may come in the exam on this particular topic. So let's do a quick revision. It graphically depicts Okay, now, so burn up chart is done. Now we have to move towards the next one, which is your burn down chart. Now, burn down chart depicts the remaining points, remaining work versus your story points. So if you see this diagram, it shows you two things. First is your blue line, which is your ideal, which this is what you should have done. Then red line shows the actual progress. So red line shows that this is where you have actually completed, and if you see, it shows that it's going down. This means it shows, so basically when you started the work, you were at 10 story points. Both ideal as well as your actual was at 10. But slowly and gradually, like after iteration number 2, your ideal should have been 9. But you were still, you were still at 10 story points at that effort. So slowly and gradually it goes down. That is your burn down chart. Okay, let's do this again. Let's try to find out whether our project is behind schedule or ahead of schedule. Once again, in the exam, you may get a question where they'll give you a graph like this and they will say, at what sprint did your project move from behind to ahead? Or they will say that, they'll give you a point and they will say that, are you behind schedule or ahead of schedule in that stage? So let's do this. So first, let's take this point into consideration. So green is your done, red is your to do. So it shows that in sprint number 3, you have actually completed 100 story point. 100 story points. Oh, not actually completed. This shows that 100 story points are left. My bad. So you started with 120 and now you are at 100 story points. So still 100 story points are left. Now, however, you should have been in sprint number 3, only 80 story points should have been left. Only 80 story points should have been left, but still 100 story points are left. What does this mean? This shows that your project is behind schedule. Now let's take into consideration this sprint number 4. Now in sprint 4, you are at 30, which means only 30 story points are left. In sprint 4, only 30 story points are left. However, to do 60, so this means, however, you should have 60 story points to be left, but you managed to cover a lot of ground, and it shows that instead of 60 story points, you just have 30 story points. So clearly at this stage, you are ahead of schedule. Okay. So if you see the difference between the burn up and burn down chart, so burn up is going up, burn down is going down, basically, right? So burn down, it looks as team got stuck with no progress. So if you see at that particular stage, when we are doing the burn down chart, it looks like, you know, they were stuck. It was not progressing at all. Like actual is a constant red line. Let me show that to you again. So when you are at the burn, so this is your burn down, right? Burn down. So if you see over here, the team has got stuck. They are not moving, they are not making any progress as such. So this means there is no progress. Now, if you see your burn up chart, which is this one, first of all, it clearly shows that at this particular stage, there was a bump in story points, which means your scope increased. So your burn up chart is very good to show whether your scope has increased or not. Okay. Secondly, it shows that team has increased its progress and velocity. So if you see over here, the actual, you see that, you know, team is increasing the velocity. They are constantly adding more and more. They're completing more and more work. So that's a good sign which they are showing. So that's your burn down and burn up chart. So let's see the difference between the burn down and burn up chart. Burn down chart tracks the remaining work, right? It is showing you that you started with 100, now 80 are left, now 60 are left, now 40 are left. Burn up chart is opposite, which shows you that this is the amount of work you have completed. Initially you did 20 story point, then 40, then 60. Now burn down chart is technically simpler to understand. Why? It just clearly shows that, hey, 80 story points are left, 60 story points are left. Burn up chart is little difficult because you have to probably use some calculations to show what is the amount of work completed. Okay, now the opposite of this is that burn up chart clearly shows whether the scope has changed or not, as compared to burn down chart where it is very difficult to show the realistic picture whether the scope has changed or not. So in this case, in your burn down chart, your scope changes and your scope creep gets hidden because it clearly not shows it. On the other hand, in burn up chart, it is clearly visible. The diagrams which I showed it to you, it was clearly visible that the scope increased when we were talking about the burn up chart. Okay, burn down, it actually provide a low level detailed view. So it's a low level detailed view enabling better tracking on the daily level. So burn down chart is more prominent from the daily perspective. At the end, on the other hand, burn up chart is actually giving you a bigger perspective, and it is actually better if you want to show it at a release level. So burn down is for daily level, burn up is actually at a release level. Now, the next two most important topics we have is the Kanban board and the Scrum task board. Very, very, very important, I would say. So if you see, this is more of a visual display of the project progress. So you have to do, doing, or in progress. Some people say that it is in progress. You can use that term as well, but it is to do, doing, and done. So this is something which is adapted from lean manufacturing, and this is more like an information radiator. Information radiator, I will cover that in the communication section, so don't worry about it. And it's very simple. In the to-do section, you have all the things which are expected out of you. In the doing section, you what the team is currently working on, they have picked it, and once the work gets complete, they meet the definition of done, then the team moves those sticky notes to the done items. Okay. Now, typically you set up limit for work in progress. You set up limit for the work in progress. Now, what is the basic purpose of setting up a limit is you want to make sure that the team is not picking too much work and everything is like in progress only. Nothing is getting complete. So what you do is, first of all, you want to make sure that you get you have a cross-functional team, they are working, and the basic purpose is to make sure that the work gets completed and in the shortest span of time. So you will always have some kind of limit on that. This was your Kanban board. Now another, we have your Scrum task board. Okay, so Scrum task board is actually talking, so Kanban board was at a overall high level, okay, which had all the user stories and stuff. But this Scrum task board is, it actually show the flow of a story from backlog all the way to the done state. Okay, there are different stages. You depict those different stages in columns, and stories as usual are displayed at your sticky notes and stuff like that. If it is a co-located team, then what you do is you actually use a physical board, which makes more sense. Now for distributed tools, you actually use an online tool for that. So what happens? Implements pull based system, which means team will pull the work whatever they have, and they will constantly update this task board. Anyone who wants to get the information about this, they can go ahead and see the board. So it acts as an information radiator. So let's see the difference between the Kanban and the Scrum task board. As I told you, Kanban board is actually at a higher level. Okay, Scrum is actually at a lower level. So let's see. So both Kanban show project status under different stages. It's the same thing, common for both. Kanban will actually establish a work in progress limit on the number of stories. In Scrum task board, you don't actually put a limit to that, okay, on the number of stories. Kanban board will actually reflect all the stories which are cleared only after the release. That's why I said it is at a high level, because you only release it after the release. Now in the Scrum board, no, it is more of sprint in action. So it shows you at a sprint level. Kanban board is for larger teams. Why? Because you are talking at a higher overall level. Scrum board is more preferable for small team, because that is where you are actually taking that into consideration. Now, if the team members are constantly changing, the project is very complex, then Kanban board makes more sense. On the other hand, if your processes are stable, team is small, you will always prefer to use the Scrum task board. Kanban board is not based on iteration. On the other hand, Scrum task board is actually based on sprint and iteration, because that is the reason it is at iteration level, right? Okay, so this marks the completion of a very important agile monitoring video I was talking about. So make sure you put special consideration on the reviews, the code review, design review, and all those, which retrospective, always an important topic. However, one thing which is most important out of this entire video is your burn down and burn up chart, many questions, and similarly the difference between Kanban board and task board. So this marks the completion of your first video in agile monitoring. Next video we will talk about the agile quality and matrix, another important one, and I'm pretty sure you will love it. So stay tuned. Thank you.